Douluo, the master of the nuclear soul. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 176, Where to Stay. It was a waterfall. As the sound of the waterfall became louder and louder, the water vapor in the air continued to stimulate Uranium's nasal cavity, making him feel a little itchy. In less than a moment, Uranium followed the sound and came to the front of the waterfall. What came into view was a huge pool of water. The pool was circular in shape, with a length and width of more than 50 meters. Above the pool of nearly 1,000 square meters was a huge waterfall. The waterfall was very wide and the sound was very noisy. Uranium was stunned for a moment. How did he hear Zhu's Huking's voice in such a noisy sound? Could it be that Zhu's Huking's voice had formed a specific audio channel for him, and as long as Zhu's Huking spoke, he could hear it within a certain distance? This was too incredible. The next moment, Uranium felt a cold gaze falling on him. With excitement, there was also some worry. Outside the waterfall not far away, a figure jumped down from a tall tree. The moment it landed, it bounced up again to relieve the force. Although there were so many movements, no sound was heard, as if it had entered silent mode, with a sense of weirdness, but extremely natural. It was Zhu's Huking. Yuan, what's wrong? Before the two figures met, Zhu's Huking's voice came from a distance. This shows her worry about Yuan. After all, Yuan said that the 10,000-year soul beast was her own. As a soul master, she naturally understood what the 10,000-year soul beast meant. This was not an enemy that the soul sect could deal with. At least it had to be at the soul saint level. Although she had never seen this strange cat-like soul beast, it did not prevent her from trembling at the amazing murderous aura. That was not an ordinary 10,000-year soul beast. Don't worry, I have driven that guy away, and my martial spirit has planted a mark on him, so he will be weakened every moment. You should reach level 30 as soon as possible, and that 10,000-year soul beast will be yours. Uranium smiled indifferently at Zhu's Huking's worries and spoke directly. Indeed, after showing his fighting power, the soul beast naturally dared not to provoke him again. Soul beasts are the most knowledgeable beings in terms of judging and seizing. They will not heal themselves, and naturally face prey, and will take action after careful consideration. Facing such a difficult existence, if they still choose to continue to fight, then they will not have 10,000 years of cultivation. The stupid soul beasts have long been driven out and killed in places with fierce competition for resources, water sources, etc. Suddenly, Uranium remembered something. Water source? Suddenly, Uranium turned back and looked around the waterfall, his eyes full of fierceness, and the soul ring that had just extinguished on his body lit up again. With such a large water source, I am afraid that the soul beast occupying this place is not a weakling. There was silence all around. A gust of wind blew by, causing a ripple on the edge of the pool closest to him. There was no sign of any soul beasts around, as if what he was worried about was just a bubble of disillusionment. It shouldn't be, such a large water source. Could it be that this is the territory of the original dark bloodthorn cat? Otherwise, the other party couldn't have appeared so quickly, otherwise it wouldn't make sense at all. I just fought with a corruption ape for a short time, and this dark bloodthorn cat immediately sneaked in. After a little thought, Uranium immediately came to a conclusion. After thinking about this, Uranium couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, but he didn't put away his martial spirit, but opened the elemental pupil to observe everything around him, including the bottom of the pool that ordinary people couldn't see through. He wanted to make sure everything was safe, and he could only be completely at ease after finding the habitat of the dark bloodthorn cat. That soul beast is not a weakling, and he must have a way to find another territory for himself. He just hoped that the other party would not be stubborn and identify this territory. Even if he lost his life, he would get it back. If it dares to come back, then it's better not to have this spirit ring. It's too dangerous. If we're not careful, not only Zhu's Huking, but also I may be killed instantly, especially after nightfall. I have no ability to resist and can only run away with Zhu's Huking. Thinking of this, Uranium began to sense the other party's position in the senses of the radiation field. The next moment, the corners of his mouth rose. Very good, it's thousands of miles away, and he doesn't need to worry. Zhu's Huking walked towards Uranium, and looked at Uranium's whole body with some concern, Until he found that except for the clothes that were a little messy, there were no other wounds. The heart was relieved and slowly returned to his position. Zhu's Huking, let's look here first to see if there is any spirit beast nest. If possible, settle here until you reach level 30, and then we will set off to find the spirit beast. After thinking for a while, Uranium said decisively. There is a water source here, and there are no soul beasts in the pool. Instead, there is something at the bottom of the pool, which emits soul power fluctuations. However, at this moment, it is not convenient for him to go in directly, and the danger around him is still uncertain. While thinking, Uranium turned around and began to follow Zhu's Huking's back, with a hawk-like gaze constantly shooting towards the surroundings. All the concealments and blind spots were revealed to him without reservation under his eyes. This place is very good, with beautiful mountains and clear waters. Although there is a waterfall in the forest, it surprised him. But when he thought of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire in the center of the sunset forest, and the terrain like a volcano, he let it go. The world is so big that there are all kinds of wonders. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. If the hidden dangers of the family are solved in the future, perhaps he can go to various places on the continent. Go see the beautiful scenery and various wonders. The far north, the Lost Canyon, and even the Soul Beast Forest in the Xingluo Empire. Although it is not written in the original book, as a ruling class stronger than the Xiandao Empire, they would not rely on the Xingdao Forest to get soul rings, right? After a while, the two circled around the waterfall. Except for a nest that exuded a foul odor and was full of bones, there were no other traces of soul beasts, and there were not even many footprints. It can be seen that few soul beasts came here to drink water. This also indirectly confirmed that this place was indeed occupied by the dark blood thorn cat. Zhu's Huking, find a place to arrange the future camp location. I'll go clean up the nearby soul beasts. Don't forget to use the belt, it's very important. After checking that there was no danger around, Uranium immediately stood up and walked towards the outside world. On the way, he continued to say, I'll be there soon. Soon, Uranium's shadow disappeared without a trace in Zhu's Huking's sight. Watching Uranium's back leave little by little, Zhu's Huking, who was still a little confused in her mind, couldn't help but reveal a trace of worry. Everything he did seemed to be designed for her in advance, and she was like a puppet who only needed to follow. What should she do? 4 updates are completed, and I will rest tomorrow. I can update more, 5 to 7 updates, no problem, just work hard. After all, I updated less in the past few days, so tomorrow's update will be compensation. I cried, there are so few subscriptions. The chapters posted at 8 o'clock before now have only 500 subscriptions. Well, everyone support the genuine version. Chapter 177 Forest Life. After the sweep, Uranium began to set traps. However, unlike the previous step-by-step plan in the camp, where there were traps at every step, at the edge of the waterfall, he just made the spacing around her a little larger, and at the same time inserted some small fragments that would emit fluorescence at night on the ground to serve as light source prompts at night, so that Zhu's Huking would not go the wrong way and get blown up. Moreover, this kind of prompt would not make the soul beasts realize that it was a trap at all, but would make them subconsciously approach. After all, the light at night would always attract certain soul beasts. Then, they would taste the taste of being blown up. After the two worked together to determine the training site in the waterfall, they began to set up camp, and Uranium also began to walk around, cutting off sections of trees with a knife, clearing the site, and by the way, seeing if he could rub a house out by hand, sleeping in a tent with Zhu's Huking every day. Although he was also a little happy, he still had to face reality after all. This kind of life could not last long, and he did not need such a somewhat vulgar method to force Zhu's Huking to face him. It would be better to build a house and enjoy the future life in advance. He had been looking forward to this kind of real forest life for a long time. He had enough clothes and seasonings, soul beasts to catch, vegetables to grow by himself, and people to accompany him. As soon as he went out, he could see the beautiful waterfall. Although the surrounding high-level soul beast area was a little dangerous, it was not fatal, but full of challenges. Most importantly, he brought enough green tea. Thinking of this, Uranium couldn't help but chuckle. This is the life I want. The radiation in the Xingdao Great Forest cannot be controlled. It's just like surviving. Now when I think about it, I feel helpless. He let go a little. In essence, he was still the Uchiha Uranium, but now, At least before Zhu Xiuqing successfully obtained the third soul ring, he would not consider officially starting his soul beast extermination plan. But vaguely, he felt as if he had forgotten something, a very vague memory, as if something was hidden in his heart, revealing a trace. Life was very tight. Although it was daytime, Zhu Xiuqing had already started practicing in the tent. It was different for ordinary people to camp in the wild and practice in the academy. In the academy, you can spend the night by meditating and practicing. However, the biggest disadvantage of meditation is that you need to concentrate. After a night of practice, although your physical condition will become better, you will be mentally exhausted for a period of time. They are not allowed to have this kind of situation when they go out to hunt soul beasts. If they can't concentrate under the attack of soul beasts, it may cause irreparable losses. Therefore, in the process of hunting soul beasts, everyone must rely on sleep to restore their condition to the best at night. This is the Soul Master Code, a theory proposed by the Master, engraved in the hearts of all Soul Masters, because it is the price of blood. But the situation is different now. Zhu Xiuqing fully believes that uranium can protect her safety, and the soul power level needs to be improved as soon as possible. All time needs to be used, otherwise she will regret it when she misses the 10,000-year soul beast. A day passed quickly. After making a piece of peeled log, Uranium began to deal with the fur of the soul-confusing ghost wolf yesterday. Building a cabin is not something that can be done overnight. The wood that has just been cut is very damp and full of moisture inside. He needs to dry it for a while to make it dry. Night is coming. Zhu Xiuqing was still practicing uninterruptedly, so the task of dinner was handed over to Uranium. The orange-yellow burning bonfire kept crackling. The branches picked up were all moist, so naturally, the sound produced by burning was also very loud. The two sat opposite each other, with a few fish stuck on the wash branches. The two took them in their hands and roasted today's dinner in front of the bonfire. Fishing, washing, removing scales, seasoning, cutting and tasting, it seems that as a member of the big foodie empire, even if Uranium has never done these things before, at this moment, he has learned some things by himself. Zhu Xiuqing, do you want to go back soon? Looking at the grilled fish in his hand, Uranium raised his head and looked at the opposite side, where the pretty face was looming in the dim environment. Zhu Xiuqing did not reply, but asked back. Do you have anything to do? Yes, there is one thing. I saw an ancient book in my family. It records that there is a treasure land in the Sunset Forest. There are treasures in it that can greatly increase people's soul power. I want to go and find it. By the way, I will also finalize my soul ring. Uranium opened his mouth and pushed everything to the ancient book, and then continued to speak. In fact, the Royal Fighting Team does not really need us. Their lineup has been formed a long time ago, and the Soul Master competition is in the next few years. They are all practicing soul power in seclusion. Our existence is not to complement them, but to continue to maintain the name of Royal Fighting Team after they graduate. So I want to stay in the Sunset Forest for a few years until the Soul Master competition is coming. We will enter the Royal Fighting formation as substitutes. How about it? Uranium suggested. Hearing Uranium say this, Zhu Xiuqing couldn't help but be stunned. Then, she couldn't help but ask, have you given up on the mimicry training area, the 1,000-year soul beast meals, and the actual combat in the soul fighting field? Uranium nodded and said solemnly, yes, after obtaining the soul ring here, I will take you to find that treasure land, and then you will practice to level 40, and then obtain soul rings. If you count this way, it may be almost time for the preliminary round. Besides, there are soul beasts in the forest that can be used for actual combat. I also want to give you special training. Fighting with different soul masters is good, but I think you need high-pressure special training more. As he spoke, Uranium took a bite of the fish that had been roasted and smelled burned, and his speech was a little unclear. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. I'm going to catch a 10,000-year soul beast. The food here is definitely better than that in the academy. Uranium's words were quite calm, and he didn't think it was shocking for a soul sect to catch a 10,000-year soul beast for food. Zhu Xiuqing was silent for a moment, and then nodded in agreement. Indeed, what Uranium said made sense. Well, let's do this for today. I'll go catch soul beasts tomorrow. I'll eat whatever I catch. That's it. The belt is on you. Remember to protect yourself after I leave. After dinner, Zhu Xiuqing continued to practice in the tent, while Uranium came to the cleared space and silently processed the fur in his hand that was waiting to be defatted. The forest was quiet at night, with occasional roars of unknown beasts or the chirping of birds such as nightingales. Through the gaps in the leaves, you can see a bright moon hanging in the night. In the center of this camp is a bonfire built by Uranium with stones. Near the inside is the tent, and outside is piled with wood waiting to be dried. On the left is the rumbling waterfall pool. Although the air was full of moisture, there was no wind to affect it. The bonfire emitted an orange light, crackling from time to time, and sparks flew out. Uranium sat by the bonfire, staring at the washed fur in his hand. The soul power in his hand gradually gathered, and he began to manually remove the flesh and fat. On the other side of him, there was a blank piece of sheepskin, on which Uranium had written something with charcoal. Detailed map of the Sunset Forest. Chapter 178 Familiar Shadow. A month later, a hunched figure stepped into the edge of the Sunset Forest. His body was stiff and rigid, and his steps were slow. He walked in a certain direction like a zombie. The wind blew. The trees rustled, and the forest stirred up the pine waves of dark green, thick green, and light green. The wind seemed to blow from the other side of the forest, and a faint heat drifted with the wind. This did not cause any inconvenience to the old man. His face was full of wrinkles, his body was thin, and he wore a pair of broken glasses. He had a large gray beard. Because he had been sleeping in the open air and had not cleaned it for a long time, his white beard turned black and gray, like a rag that had been used for a long time. Only the tattered white uniform on his body and the standard three-sword logo on his left chest that was faintly exposed showed that he was a great Soul Master level Battle Soul Master. Although he looked like a Battle Soul Master, there was no agility in his eyes. Soul beasts appeared from time to time around, wanting to have a good meal. But the next moment, these approaching soul beasts suddenly froze in place. Their eyes became as lifeless as the old man's, their faces and bodies instantly became thin, as if while the flesh and blood had been taken away, the skin and flesh were close to the bones, like a mummy. Faintly, at the back of the old man's waist, in a simple wooden box, a dark red blood color gradually lit up. As if reaching a certain key point, the old man suddenly stopped his mechanical steps. The stiff head was raised, and the lifeless pupils swayed left and right. The old man was caught in a difficult choice. One direction was the center of the Sunset Forest, a volcanic basin emitting steaming hot air. The other direction was the existence that he wanted to approach very much in his mind, and his whole body was full of inexplicable rhythm. The two very attractive places were in different directions, and for a moment, the old man was caught in a difficult choice. Where to go? The figure stood there, lost in deep thought. From time to time, soul beasts ran over, their eyes full of murderous intent, wanting to feast on him. But before they get close, they will be like the soul beasts that died on the roadside, with all the blood disappearing and their flesh and blood drying up. It was as if an invisible ghost had stolen their lives. Such a strange scene stunned the surviving soul beasts. They wanted to escape, but before they took a step on the ground, their cunning and frightened eyes instantly lost their luster, as if they were controlled, and moved their eyes to the soul beasts around them. The bloody soul beast melee began. Without hesitating for a long time, the old man determined the direction and headed towards the center of the Sunset Forest. On the way, all the soul beasts that passed by, without any signs, fell into a crazy and desperate battle, including the existence of 10,000 years. Clang. The sound of swords colliding suddenly sounded in the forest. After the two figures staggered in the air, they landed directly, and they also blurred for a while. The afterimage disappeared, and collided again on the ground. Unlike the motionless gray-robed figure, another rather slender gray-robed figure was directly shocked and took a few steps back. His hands trembled slightly, and he was shocked by the opponent's huge force, so that he could not hold the weapon in his hand tightly. Taking off his hood, the gray-robed figure standing still revealed a head of bright silver flowing hair, which fell on his shoulders. Under the light, it was shining. The slender figure with the same action also took off his hood, revealing a head of black hair. Uranium, my martial spirit has become cat claws after being possessed. Why do I still need weapons like swords? Zhu's Huking raised his hand, and the cat claws tightly grasped a fine steel long sword, with a puzzled tone in his tone. Urin casually made a knife flower and said casually, think about it, if you meet a flame soul master in the future, with fire all over your body, are you sure you want to touch the burning flame on the opposite side with your claws? The same is true for Frozen Soul Masters and Spike Soul Masters. The claws themselves are the last means of combat. To put it more closely, do you remember Diana? Under the protection of her moonlight, you would be torn apart if you touched her. Do you remember the pain at that time? With these words, Zhu Huqing was stunned. In her mind, she recalled the experience of being beaten by Diana, especially the entanglement when she didn't dare to attack, and the wound that was aching at the moment. Although the scars have long healed, the shadow left at that time has always been there. What you said makes sense. Zhu Huqing nodded confidently, then raised the knife light, ready, and looked in the direction of Uran. Remember, use speed to control the weapon, not strength. Uranium said seriously, and the next moment, the longsword in his hand was also raised, and the figure suddenly blurred, rushing directly in front of Zhu Huqing, with a big move, splitting Hushin with one move, and slashing down on her head. Borrowing her own agility, Zhu Huqing used all her speed to avoid a sharp edge when Uranium let her go, and kept fighting back, with a clanging sound. In the evening, the sun was setting. The two had already stopped practicing, sitting in the camp, and were practicing at this time. As if realizing that the time was almost up, Uranium stood up from the ground with a bang, looking at the forest that was gradually getting darker. The martial soul radiation eye was opened, and the surroundings that were originally filled with shadows suddenly became as bright as day. I'm going to see which soul beast is so lucky today and won my first prize. Uranium said to Zhu Huqing, who also stood up. Be careful on the road. Zhu Huqing nodded and responded. All the soul beasts around were killed by Uranium. It seemed that other soul beasts also knew that there was a powerful guy nearby, and they all moved away. If Uranium wanted to catch soul beasts to eat, he had to run a certain distance. But he was fast enough, so he didn't have to worry about this at all. The next moment, Uranium's figure became blurred. After a few flashes, he completely left the safe camp and attacked the outside world. Zhu Huqing watched Uranium leave with a complicated look in his eyes. Shaking his head, Zhu Huqing shook off the thoughts in his mind and continued to sit cross-legged, preparing to attack the 30th level soul power. The latest novels will be released on the 69th book bar. She didn't have much time. If it weren't for the high energy meat supply of thousands of years every day, she wouldn't have improved so quickly, and even her strength far exceeded that of a normal agile attack system soul master. At this moment, she was enough to compete in close combat with a strong attack system without any state enhancement. This was all due to the high-pressure close combat brought by Uranium, which allowed her to fully absorb and digest the energy in the soul beast meat. Uranium was outside the camp and didn't know what Zhu Huqing was thinking. Suddenly, a low roar and a faint fishy smell came to her nose, and the woods on the left swayed as if there was a strong wind blowing. The good thing about Sunset Forest is that there are many high-level soul beasts, and you will never worry about food. The young man who was running suddenly stopped, his eyes slightly fixed, and looked at the woods on the left. As soon as the voice fell, a colorful tiger jumped out of the woods. It was a tiger with a pitch-black body, only a white king pattern on its forehead. It was more than 3 meters long and about 1.5 meters tall at the shoulder. Although its body was huge, it was extremely agile. Hey, Ghost Tiger! Uranium chose to attack without hesitation instead of retreating. The Ghost Tiger is known for its terrifying speed and attack power. It is one of the powerful soul beasts. It is extremely ferocious and will fight to the death for any opponent who dares to invade its territory. But facing Uranium, especially when his soul power was fully activated, he was only qualified to fight. Seeing that Uranium's long sword was about to chop the Ghost Tiger, its body flashed strangely, and the original one Ghost Tiger turned into 3. After the long sword chopped down, one of them turned into a phantom and disappeared, and the other 2 rushed up even faster. The Ghost Tiger's innate ability, Shadow Clone. But under the gaze of the radiation eye, the Ghost Tiger had nowhere to hide. Although Uranium's eyes could not be said to be flaming eyes, the elemental pupils were open. Are your other 2 clones without life breath here to deceive ghosts? A fierce kick directly hit the main body, accompanied by the sound of breaking through the air, and was kicked directly and hit a big tree, making a muffled sound. After a few jumps, Uranium came to the side of the Ghost Tiger. It still wanted to struggle, but the Ghost Tiger's body, which was curled up because of pain, stretched out instantly, and then a huge black light and shadow instantly emerged from its body and rushed straight to Uranium in front of it. The black light and shadow condensed into a shape exactly like the Ghost Tiger's body in midair, and even the size was almost the same. The terrifying energy fluctuations made the air emit a sharp whistle, as if it was cut in half by the black light. Die? Facing the impact of the black light and shadow, Uranium did not dodge or evade. The black light of the fourth soul ring on his body instantly shone. There was no additional particle flow, but a single leg side kick. The amazing energy quickly merged together and turned into a faint meteor. Then, he kicked the black light and shadow. There was no roar of collision. The ghost tiger watched his desperate struggle being easily penetrated and crushed. Finally, it fell on his body. That was the last scene it saw. There are several more to come, and they will be posted in the evening. Chapter 179. Moving towards the goal. The chirping of birds echoed in the forest in the early morning. As Uranium and Zhu Huqing walked forward, a group of birds fluttered their wings and flew out of the branches in a panic. Perhaps because they were getting deeper, there was no morning fog here. The sun shone on the green forest, and the air was full of fresh smells. Uranium was still leading the way in the front. Although it was not obvious from the outside, Uranium's fingers were faintly white where they were holding the handle of the knife. His physical condition was very healthy, and the dark bloodthorn cat did not leave any scars on his body, but he was quite nervous at the moment. It has been more than 2 months since they entered the forest. Zhu Huqing has reached level 30 and can absorb level 30 spirit rings at any time. After the two entered the depths of the forest, it was not convenient for him to rest at night, but he stayed up all night until dawn, for fear of encountering some difficult spirit beasts. Because of his rest, he did not have enough time to prepare for the battle. We are almost there. Uranium sensed the position of the dark bloodthorn cat and said solemnly. The two have been chasing the spirit beast for almost half a month. The other party may have sensed something and kept running towards the depths of the forest. With his own talent, he would hardly be killed by any soul beast. However, as he went deeper, it was hard for Uranium and Zhu Huqing. God knows how much effort he put into dealing with the soul beasts of 30,000 years and 50,000 years. Zhu Huqing was beside him, and the surroundings were very dangerous. She couldn't stay away, otherwise he would just kick her with a nuclear explosion, which would be very clean and neat. But there is no if. Once he lost his protection, even if he killed all the soul beasts, Zhu Huqing might still encounter fatal danger. Chronos armor is not invincible. It has its own basic assembly conditions. Once Zhu Huqing was in danger and tried to use Chronos to save her life, this soul guide armor actually failed. If it weren't for Uranium's desperate efforts to block the fatal energy slash for her later, I'm afraid Zhu Huqing would have died. But it was also during that fatal crisis that Uranium saw the scene that made him stunned for a long time. There were tears in the corners of the girl's eyes. Wait a moment. Uranium, who was walking, suddenly caught a glimpse of something unusual and stopped immediately. Zhu Huqing immediately became nervous. Since entering the depths of the forest this time, Uranium has never stopped on its own initiative. Could it be that he sensed a huge threat lurking nearby? Uranium slowly walked to the left front, and after a dozen steps, he stopped under a tree. He reached out and touched the bark. The bark was missing a full half, as if it was caused by a sharp weapon, or as if something cutting flashed by and cut a hole. He touched the broken end and it was smooth. Uranium looked around and soon found more tiny traces. Then, his eyes paused, as if he had discovered something. Zhu Huqing followed Uranium's gaze and looked at a strange color in the dense grass. Uranium went deeper, bent down and picked up a stone that exuded a gray luster and seemed to be covered in dust. Zhu Huqing came over and saw the stone in Yu's hand. She said in surprise, "This was caused by that soul beast. I've seen it before." Yu nodded slightly and continued to search around. But before he could exert force with his fingers, suddenly, the stone surrounded by the gray ore suddenly softened, turned into powder, and flowed down along Yu's fingertips. The two were shocked. The next moment, Yu's heart, which had been lifted, slowly relaxed. Sure enough, with the decline of years, the soul beast's shadow world inheritance talent has also been weakened. According to what they have seen before, if it is in its prime, this kind of thing covered by the gray ore has actually been transformed into another level of items, instead of exploding and dissipating like now. The two searched around and found footprints of varying depths, broken black long legs, scattered hair, fallen broken wood everywhere, and the land exposed after the grass was completely shoveled away. More and more traces were found by him, but you could not simulate the scene of the battle. There must have been a fierce battle here. There are quite a few soul beasts involved, and the dark bloodthorn cat is also involved, but there are no soul beast corpses around, and there are no leftovers. It is very likely that a third party intervened and either drove them all away or retreated on their own. Zhu's Huking blinked her beautiful eyes. So, there are top soul beasts nearby? Then what is fighting with the dark bloodthorn cat? Uranium frowned, and her tone was not very sure. It seems that a giant soul beast drove them away. I looked at the traces of broken wood. Basically, they were broken violently, and the footprints around are very heavy. Suddenly, Uranium seemed to think of something and hurriedly looked at the traces around. But after searching for a while, he was stunned and stood there, and his whole body began to tremble slightly. Zhu's Huking didn't notice the change in Uranium at this moment, but squatted on the ground and touched the footprints with her fingers. There are wolves here, and there are some white silks nearby, but they are torn. There should be demon spiders. There is a big pit here, which should be used to dig holes, such as burrow spiders, or burrowing rock snakes. There is a broken uranium here? What's wrong with you? The latest novels are published on the 69th book bar. Zhu's Huking didn't hear Uranium speak, and immediately raised her head in confusion. Suddenly, she saw a scene that she didn't see before. Uranium was shaking all over. What's wrong? Zhu's Huking approached Uranium and put one hand on his shoulder, bringing a faint warmth, soothing Uranium, who was a little unnatural. Zhu's Huking, I don't know if you have noticed that the most important thing is missing in the current battlefield. Uranium raised his head, his face as gloomy as water. What? Zhu's Huking looked around again, a little confused. There is not even a drop of blood here. Zhu's Huking was stunned as soon as she finished speaking. The next moment, the girl suddenly turned around and rummaged around. She had just seen a broken arthropod insect leg, so there should be green juice spilling out. Why is there nothing nearby? Then, Zhu's Huking picked up the arthropod leg and shook it gently. There was not even a drop of juice, nothing at all. Seeing this, the girl's face turned pale. There was a powerful thing that appeared not long ago. The soul ring on Uranium began to light up, and unknowingly, a black and silver belt was wrapped around his waist. Then, in his hand, a white and green mixed Chronos exclusive soul guide appeared, ready to connect to the belt around his waist at any time. All the blood was sucked out. Zhu's Huking. I suspect that it's not just a group of soul beasts fighting the dark bloodthorn cats, but something attracted them all and ate them all at once. Only the dark bloodthorn cat escaped with its nearly invincible inherited talent. This is a slaughterhouse for top soul beasts. Chapter 180 The Radiant Emperor. After all, the surroundings were still calm. Uranium and Zhu's Huking huddled together, and the eye of Element scanned the surroundings. This unexpected situation made his scalp tingle. Now, there were two choices before him. The first choice was to leave here immediately, give up tracking the dark bloodthorn cat, and escape from here before the terrifying soul beast came back. In this way, they would be safe. This was a 10,000-year soul beast area. It was conceivable what kind of terrifying existence it was that could heat a group of high-level soul beasts. The second choice was to gamble that the other party was far away from here and wandered in other areas, and continue to track the dark bloodthorn cat that was escaping quickly, and kill it quickly, so that Zhu's Huking could absorb the soul ring that was the top in every sense. The dark bloodthorn cat might not have much time left. After 2 months, it might have been weakened. If it was not absorbed this time, there would be no chance next time. There were many risks involved. The combat power of the terrifying soul beast was unknown, its race was unknown, its whereabouts were unknown, and there was no news about anything. Moreover, the dark bloodthorn cat was not a vegetarian. If it was not killed during the day, it would come to attack madly at night, which would be a headache for him and Zhu's Huking. The two were silent, one continued to observe the traces, and the other was alert to the surroundings. Zhu's Huking was waiting for Uranium's decision. Without spending too much time thinking, Uranium quickly made a decision. For this dark bloodthorn cat, we have been waiting for more than 2 months. We must not waste this time. Once this top quality soul beast is missed, I am afraid there will be no second chance to meet it in my life. Moreover, the soul skills it brings must be top-notch. For you, it is a cat-type soul beast, and it is also the most suitable for you. If there is any danger, I will deal with it. Understood. Zhu's Huking said concisely. The two-person pursuit team changed direction. After observing the traces around, they no longer followed the smooth routine, but directly climbed the tree and began to circle around, forming an arc route, and continued to go deeper in the direction of the dark bloodthorn cat. But unlike the previous cautious actions, Uranium jumped between the trees while splashing something on the ground. The first soul skill was glittering. His trump card was the Chronos armor. He believed that as long as he could successfully kill the dark bloodthorn cat, with the existence of the armor, he could hold back the top soul beast and provide Zuzuking with time to absorb the soul ring. An hour later, a river appeared in front of everyone. Uranium looked at the other side of the gurgling river, and his face froze. The dark bloodthorn cat in his perception was here. He followed his perception to track it, but the dark bloodthorn cat ran too fast and flashed by, as if it was running across the shadows and was afraid of something. But now, it stopped in place, motionless. If it weren't for the fact that the energy point would disappear directly after the radioactive creature died, he would probably think that the other party had been killed. Suddenly, Uranium began to sprinkle traps around, densely packed, with almost no gaps. Uranium. Zuzuking was a little confused. Why did he do this? I'll bring that dark bloodthorn cat over here, but don't mind if it looks ugly. The spirit ring and the spirit beast don't match each other. Uranium said solemnly. After being infected with radiation, it is no longer an ordinary spirit beast. Its appearance must have changed drastically, and it may even have some unusual skills. But Uranium is not worried about all this. He himself is the natural enemy of this kind of spirit beast, a natural king. He is just worried that after he leaves, Zuzuking will fall into a crisis like last time. If something really happens to her, he will regret it for the rest of his life. So there is the current scene. Uranium almost spares no expense to set traps around. Seeing that Uranium is so worried about her safety, Zuzuking's face changed slightly, and she said calmly, "Aren't you going to kill the spirit beast across the river? If there is any danger, I will come here." Then, he continued, "You can definitely protect me, right?" Uranium was stunned and couldn't help laughing. "Leave it to me." The next moment, Uranium glanced at the deep and dark forest, his face calm, and he jumped out with a footstep. Crossing the river, a silver light bloomed from his hand. With a longsword in hand, the radiation field was fully opened, and the martial soul radiation eye was opened. The surroundings that were originally dark for some reason suddenly became as bright as day, without any dark color. Today is the death of the dark bloodthorn cat, and there is no need to hold back. Except to let it have its last breath and let Zuzuking finish it off. The judgment has begun. With a faint low hum, Uranium's figure disappeared directly into the dark forest. Everything around was in shadow. It seemed that it was the surrounding environment that made the other party stop escaping, but stopped here and enjoyed the natural shelter. Wandering in the quiet forest, the speed of the figure was so fast that it left a faint afterimage. Suddenly, Uranium quickly tilted his head. The latest novel is published on 69 Shuba. A gray gas suddenly flew over Uranium's neck, carrying a hint of ominous breath, and sank lightly into the ground, dyeing a touch of green plants with a layer of light gray. Without much hesitation, the energy absorption aura was fully opened, and then the location was sensed. "Found you." Uranium showed a sneer at the corner of his mouth, and the fourth black soul ring suddenly lit up. Then, a normal explosive kick was kicked in the air towards the sensing location. Indistinctly, a shadowy place fluctuated slightly. From under the gray shadow, a pair of purple and gray eyes appeared, with a frightening fear in their eyes, staring at Uranium's figure. It was the dark bloodthorn cat. At this moment, it was no longer as cunning and treacherous as it was 2 months ago, but full of unspeakable despair. It was not because this place was easy to hide, but because it could not hide anymore. In fact, there was one thing that Uranium guessed wrong. It was not because the dark bloodthorn cat escaped from the terrifying soul beast with its strange talent, but because it would not die from normal casualties at all. It had turned into half-element, half-entity state, and the damage to the body's functions would not be fatal. This was also the reason why it was still alive. But at this moment, it could no longer walk, there was no trace of blood under its skin and flesh, it was skinny and dry, like a terrifying mummy. But the faintly glowing surface was transforming its entire body, and the radiation particle power was not particularly effective for a soul beast like it that could only be regarded as a semi-living being, so the reduced upper limit of life did not fall to the 100-year level. But seeing the attack coming, the gray light in the eyes of the dark bloodthorn cat shone brightly, and a black light flashed on his body. He barely stood up with a ferocious look. Suddenly, countless black lights rushed out, turning into dozens of breaths over a foot in size, rising into the air and strangling with the explosive kick of uranium. If the previous one was a test of the reaction of both sides, then this time it was a test of skills. It was also the last test. The 3 miniature fan-shaped icons in uranium's eyes suddenly accelerated their rotation speed, and the power of the radiation field descended here. I am the Emperor of Life. The dark bloodthorn cat, who had originally planned to fight to the last, suddenly solidified his body and could not move. Naturally, he could not make the action of jumping shadows. Everything stopped at this moment. Whether it was breathing or the slight breeze. Chapter 181 The Changes of the Two. Boom. In the collision of attacks, violent fluctuations mixed with smoke and dust came. Uranium pinched the neck of the dark bloodthorn cat with one hand, and a steady stream of radiation energy mixed with soul power flowed from the opponent's body into his hand. But the opponent could not move at all. He is the monarch of radiation. Without his permission, anyone, any soul beast, any existence must be quiet. Looking at the dark bloodthorn cat at this moment, somehow, Uranium was also slightly frightened. The touch of the non-living thing in his hand almost made him unable to start. The opponent did not look like a soul beast at all. The body was withered, the fur was close to the bones, and it was cold to the touch. If you didn't know, you would think it was dead. But it was still alive tenaciously. The battle was not as fierce as Uranium thought. Just seeing and touching, the radiation particles that were constantly raging in the opponent's body took over the opponent's body. This is also the reason why he once faced the radiation titan giant ape, opened the 3 Megatema, and completely awakened the radiation field. He could freeze the opponent in place with one encounter and then turn his hand to kill him. Even the energy in your body has submitted to me, what else can you use to fight me? The next moment, Uranium began to judge the approximate age of this soul beast. 2,000 years. Oh no, the age is still too high. Maybe Zuzukin can't absorb it yet, otherwise her life will be in danger. Looking at the scene in front of him, Uranium said secretly. No, Zuzukin's physique can even reach the level of soul sect now. She used to have 3 consecutive months of medicinal diet plus 1,000-year soul beast diet, plus now 2 months of 10,000-year soul beast nourishment. She may be able to bear it. The higher the age, the greater the power of the soul skills. Uranium turned his head and thought about it, and considered that Zuzukin is not the same as ordinary soul masters now. This kind of nourishment is not available to ordinary people. In fact, Zuzukin may be the only one in the whole Douluo Continent who has this treatment. Uranium has watched Douluo Continent II, so he naturally understands how important soul beast diet is for young people to improve their physique. So Uranium was not joking when he said that Zuzukin, who was level 30, could match the physique of a level 40 soul sect. Although I don't know what happened to you, please die peacefully now. After absorbing for a while, the black light on the body of the immobile dark bloodthorn cat also weakened a lot, as if it had entered an inevitable state of depression. The eyes became darker and darker, the luster continued to weaken, and the breath of life that followed began to decrease rapidly. It did not die as a living side, but it was all supported by the radiation energy. On the other side, the shadow body continued to survive in a nearly perfect posture, allowing its life to continue hanging on, so that it would not collapse and die after losing all the blood in the body. But at this moment, this intertwined balance is being destroyed. Before this, although the radiation particles shattered the atomic structure inside its body, causing DNA instability, it still had soul power to back it up, and there were nearly half of the shadow life carriers. The radiation particles are also a kind of energy, so it is accompanied by another disordered but terrifying force. And now, this energy has been drawn away. Huh? Something's wrong. Wait, are you dying? Shit. Suddenly, Uranium felt something was wrong, and his expression suddenly changed. What's going on? After the DNA was shattered and the radiation energy was absorbed, should it still be alive, but lose the lifespan? If it died in his hands, could it be that he was the one to absorb this soul ring? Without hesitation, he picked up the dark bloodthorn cat with one hand, and Uranium immediately stood up and shot towards Zuzukin. He exerted force with his legs. Facing the big tree blocking the road, he didn't want to take a detour at all. He kicked the road with great force and plowed a deep gully. Be quick. Otherwise, 2 months of thinking will go to waste. The breath of the dark bloodthorn cat in his hand became weaker and weaker, like a small sampan in a storm, and there was a risk of destruction at any time. He still underestimated himself after all. He thought that the other party might fight with him several times. After all, the other party had given him a life-threatening throbbing before. But he didn't expect that the soul beast infected with radiation for 2 months already belonged to the category of radiation monsters, and was completely distinguished from ordinary soul beasts. And under his radiation field, any existence infected with radiation had no power to resist, no matter how special or powerful the other party was. In the dark forest, a figure was speeding up, destroying everything in the way. It rushed straight in the direction it came from, like an unstoppable charge. The next moment, a light flashed in front of his eyes. Then, the sparkling water surface came into view. It was almost done. Uranium looked at the soul beast with its last breath in its hand, and immediately shouted to Zuzhuking across the river. Zuzhuking. Finally, Uranium lifted the soul beast and exerted force with one arm. Then threw it. Zuzhuking, who was standing there waiting nervously, suddenly raised her head and heard Uranium shout. Then a gray-black shadow turned into a parabola, drew an arc in the air, and fell to the ground. The girl squatted slightly, and then jumped. The latest novel is published on the 69th book bar. The spirit possessed the body, the cat's claws flashed with cold light, and the sharp hooks with barbs attacked decisively, and the second soul skill, the Netherworld 100 Claws, was activated. Countless claw shadows were woven into a terrifying web of sharp blades. The dark bloodthorn cat was already exhausted at this time, but its body was tough, and it was still not something that Zuzhuking, a second ring battle soul master, could kill immediately. However, Zuzhuking's attack speed was too fast, and the powerful speed and strength attached to her Netherworld 100 Claws were fully displayed in the attack. Sparks kept bursting from the dark bloodthorn cat, and at the same time, there were pieces of blood. You know, Zuzhuking's main ability is reflected in speed and attack power. The attacks she launched all have piercing effects. The wounds that don't look very deep, but the soul power has penetrated into it, madly destroying the flesh and blood in the opponent's body. But in the end, the dark bloodthorn cat fell directly to the ground, ending its last struggle. Zuzhuking also fell to the ground, with her sharp claws piercing her eye sockets, and a sound like a broken lens was heard. At the same time, she exerted force with her arms, and immediately, a bloody thing rushed into the sky. Such a cold appearance immediately frightened Uranium, who had heard about it and rushed over. The girl's last action finally extinguished the last life of the dark bloodthorn cat. The tail and ears that were originally shaking continuously were directly stagnant. The next moment, they became soft and drooped. Silent death came. Uranium stood there blankly, watching Zuzhuking kill the dark bloodthorn cat with one claw, and was a little speechless for a while. It must be said that her action just now was too horrible. Seeing this scene, he couldn't help but feel a faint pain in his eyes. But Zuzhuking was not as cold as Uranium thought at the moment. When she made the killing action just now, she only thought of the scene in the past. It was you who risked his life to block the deadly killing intent for me. If it weren't for the soul beast, there would be no need for you. That hideous scar on his back. 3 updates plus 2 in the afternoon, a total of 5 updates, and 3 o'clock in the morning, sleep. Tomorrow will be the normal 3 updates. I will continue to add more next week. Chapter 182 The Beginning of Torture. Half a month ago, the two began to track the dark bloodthorn cat. It was that near-death experience that made Zuzhuking realize that she was not here for a picnic in the forest, but to obtain spirit rings. So at this moment, what Uranium saw was Zuzhuking clawing into the dark bloodthorn cat's eyes and then directly flipping its skull off, because she had made up her mind. Under the gaze of the two, the dark bloodthorn cat's life breath completely dissipated, and dots of purple-black light began to condense above its body. It was time to absorb the spirit ring. After the death of a 10,000-year spirit beast, the spirit ring can last for an hour, and it can be absorbed as long as it is absorbed within an hour. Seeing the purple-black spirit ring condensed by the dark bloodthorn cat in front of her, Zuzhuking was stunned. Is it so old? It's already purple and black. Zuzhuking was not in a hurry to absorb the spirit ring formed by the dark bloodthorn cat. She was still a little hesitant at this time. She couldn't judge the exact cultivation level of this dark bloodthorn cat, but it was certain that it was definitely more than a few thousand years old, and it was even close to 10,000 years. No, it's only about 2,000 years old. It used to be a 10,000-year level soul beast, but I have broken the upper limit of its age, so it showed purple and black. Uranium's face was also a little hesitant. Could she bear 2,000 years? There were many differences in the soul rings of soul beasts, like the 10,000-year radiation titan giant AP absorbed before. In the field of radiation, it was the most gentle soul beast. It was not difficult to absorb its soul ring. But the dark bloodthorn cat in front of him was different. It was definitely the most terrifying existence of soul beasts. Relatively speaking, although its soul ring could play a greater amplification effect, it was also much more dangerous in the absorption process. Because the soul master who absorbed it had to withstand the impact of this violent energy. Once the body or will could not hold on, it was very likely to cause a fatal backlash. This is the result of our 2-month wait. I will be fine. Uranium, come on, help me protect the law. Looking at the soul ring flashing with a faint light in front of her, Zhu Huqing slowly suppressed the fear of death in her heart, and said with a slightly trembling voice. As she spoke, the girl took a deep breath, inhaled again, and exhaled. She adjusted her state to the peak. Thank you for your help. After the adjustment, she walked to the side of the dark bloodthorn cat and sat down. Uranium nodded to Zhu Huqing seriously, waved his hand, and the trap flew out of his hand, carefully guarding. With his protection, Zhu Huqing no longer needed to worry about the threat brought to her by ordinary soul beasts. Zhu Huqing was finally able to absorb the powerful soul ring in front of her wholeheartedly. Raising her right hand, the cat claws brought by the nether spirit cat martial spirit slowly appeared and covered her arm. Taking a deep breath, Zhu Huqing summoned the soul ring of the dark bloodthorn cat. The purple-black light seemed to have finally found a way to vent after waiting for a long time. As soon as it sensed Zhu Huqing's martial spirit, it immediately swarmed towards the girl like a sea embracing hundreds of rivers. I will definitely win. Seeing the rich purple-black light instantly enveloping Zhu Huqing's body, Uranium's expression suddenly tense up. Such a strong soul power, the 10,000-year soul ring was downgraded to a 1,000-year soul ring. The energy contained in it may far exceed the 2,000-year-old crypt spider absorbed by Tang San. Even if Zhu Huqing has been nourished by so many soul beast meat meals, she may still die. Zhu Huqing is the person involved. Zhu Huqing felt it more clearly. She only felt a huge warm current suddenly pouring into her body. Before she could react, the warm current had already begun to freeze her body like cold frost. The characteristics and talents of the dark bloodthorn cat itself determined the violent nature of the soul ring it formed. As soon as the strong aura entered Zhu Huqing's body, it began to forcibly transform her body. Although the energy contained in the soul ring has no consciousness, it is not something that Zhu Huqing's consciousness can control. Originally, everything was normal, but Uranium forgot one thing. The soul beast of 10,000 years has soul vibration. Under the strong soul power fluctuation, Zhu Huqing felt that her body and consciousness seemed to be completely dissipated between heaven and earth. The severe discomfort made her spit out blood. Zhu Huqing Uranium looked at Zhu Huqing, who was shrouded in gray aura, frowned tightly, and there was endless worry in her eyes. Unconsciously, the knuckles of her clenched fingers turned pale. Why didn't I think of it just now? The talent of the dark bloodthorn cat is the shadow world. After the final domain evolution is completed, it will completely merge into the shadow and will never be attacked. Zhu Huqing is a physical body. If something goes wrong, she will die. Uranium saw that the soul ring absorption had already begun, and a strong regret surged in his heart. Why did he choose such a terrifying soul beast? Why not change to other normal soul beasts? What should I do if something goes wrong? What should I do? Exclamation mark. Zhu Huqing, who was sitting cross-legged in the center, could no longer be seen. She was shrouded in a layer of light gray mist. Even when Uranium opened the radiation eye, he could not see what kind of transformation was going on inside. The gray in the mist was not the light of soul power, but a gray breath, like the gloomy feeling of the shadow world gradually coming from under her, assimilating and spreading all around. Just now, with a violent fluctuation of soul power on her body, the dead dark bloodthorn cat beside her suddenly turned into a gray shadow, and suddenly exploded like powder. As the soul power evaporated into the air, it turned into this light gray mist. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Uranium's eyes are very sharp, and he immediately saw that the place where the dark bloodthorn cat was originally was actually left with an object emitting a silver-gray luster, and the fluctuation of soul power was faintly heard. It was a piece of bone similar to the spine, except that it was connected to other bones, which were the soul bones of the body. The sternum, ribs, thoracic vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae, and cervical vertebrae were almost connected together as a whole structure. The whole body exuded a silver-gray color, faintly glowing, with a magnificence that did not belong to this world, as if it was cast from a colorless and transparent crystal. The most bizarre thing was that the energy it released formed an energy stand, slowly supporting itself up and floating in the air. This is the trunk bone. Seeing it, Uranium was stunned. In addition to the external soul bones, it is the top soul bone. The trunk bone. He glanced at Zhu's Huking, who was still trying to absorb the soul ring, and then looked at the soul bone that was emitting quiet fluctuations. Uranium's brows were still furrowed. If Zhu's Huking encounters danger again, maybe we can fight side by side, but you must survive. Zhu's Huking frowned, pursed her lips tightly, and her body was constantly spasming. In addition, the sweat beads under her fair skin flowed like water. It is conceivable how intense the discomfort she is now suffering. Indistinctly, her body is sometimes illusory and sometimes solid, as if she is crossing two worlds, but she can never find her own destination. Every time she makes an unbearable painful sound inside, she feels a heart-wrenching feeling, and the third soul ring that should appear with absorption has never appeared, which proves that Zhu's Huking has not been able to completely absorb the soul ring of the dark bloodthorn cat. Only Zhu's Huking knows the pain she is suffering at this time. In front of the energy of the dark bloodthorn cat's soul ring, she feels that her whole body seems to disappear. Whether it is her hands and feet, internal organs or her own consciousness, they are all becoming blurred. The tyrannical energy is constantly diluting her body, making her always in extreme despair. If Zhu's Huking's situation in front of her can be calculated, then her final ending can only be one. Completely disappear from the world, leaving no trace of existence. However, some things cannot be calculated, such as willpower and bonds. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 183 You Are My Bond. At this time, although Zhu's Huking's body has faded to the point where it is barely visible, there is a figure that has taken root deep in her heart, allowing her consciousness to still retain a trace of clarity. It was as if there was a hand holding her tightly, preventing her from falling into the endless abyss. But above that hot palm, there was a cloud of mist that could not be seen clearly. I have always been begging you to help me, but I am obviously useless. Suddenly, I seemed to hear a faint sob. It has always been like this from the beginning when we met until now, but I can only repay you by cooking some meals. Why do you help me, who is destined to live a short time? Whether it is fighting or other things, I can't help and I am even a burden to you. Why are you so good to me? As time went by, Zhu's Huking's consciousness became weaker and weaker, and her mind was in a trance, as if she had forgotten something. Her mind was blank, and she kept floating upwards. There was even a gust of wind blowing, and this remaining consciousness would dissipate. But vaguely, she seemed to hear a familiar cry. She couldn't hear who was talking, but she felt that the voice was very familiar. It was like the shadow that was most profound in her mind. Zhu's Huking. Then, a woman's voice emerged in the sky. I think as the voice in the sky became louder and louder, even Zhu's Huking's gradually dissipating consciousness was briefly condensed. Who is it? The girl stood in the white mist, constantly looking back, looking at the unfamiliar surroundings, trying to find the source of the sound. I think another vague idea appeared in Zhu's Huking's mind. Unlike the call, this idea was just like the previous one, and the follow-up was completely inaudible. What was she thinking? The quiet valley was full of mist, and the echoing sounds gradually became clear, completely enveloping the girl. I think suddenly, the echoing sounds suddenly closed. A cold girl's voice resounded through the valley. I want to live. Buzz! Exclamation mark. Zhu's Huking's body, which was sitting cross-legged, instantly solidified. The dissipated consciousness returned, and the originally blurred white fog in the valley dissipated. Except for the stone pillar under Zhu's Huking's feet, everything else turned out to be an endless abyss. The owner of the arm that had been pulling her and preventing her from falling into hell appeared. It was the silver-haired young man who gritted his teeth. Uranium. Yes, I want to live. Uranium is still waiting for me. In the gray fog, Zhu's Huking's eyes were clear, and there was no sign of any virtualization. And with a shrill cat cry, the last soul power of the bloodthorn cat was completely dissipated. I will definitely win. With this belief, Zhu Zhuking's powerful energy fluctuations continued to increase, and the gray fog around her body became more and more obvious. In the gray fog, there was even a gray breath overflowing, like a direct bullet, instantly piercing the trap on the ground, and the trap was transformed into a gray area before it even had time to burst out. But it was only this time. As she resisted the fading of her consciousness and body, the energy contained in the dark bloodthorn cat's soul ring was also being absorbed by Zhu Zhuking's body bit by bit. As one thing grew, the other grew, and the energy that was enough to blur her existence was also constantly weakening. The most critical problem Zhu Zhuking had to face now was how to integrate the absorbed soul ring energy with her body and her martial soul, the nether spirit cat. Although the soul of the dark bloodthorn cat that interfered with her absorption of the soul ring had completely dissipated, her body did not reject external forces. However, the energy of the dark bloodthorn cat's soul ring was too overbearing, so that the nether spirit cat martial soul was somewhat reluctant to absorb it, and the consequence of forcibly absorbing it was exactly what Zhu Zhuking had just experienced. Unable to withstand such a powerful energy, it merged with the inherited talent of the dark bloodthorn cat, became a real shadow existence, and then died. Fortunately, both of them were cat martial souls, and their talents were a little similar, which greatly reduced the difficulty of absorption. Otherwise Zhu Zhuking's physical strength would probably not be able to withstand it at this time. A top-level soul beast with a talent of more than 10,000 years was downgraded to more than 2,000 years. It should not be absorbed by ordinary soul masters. More than 5 hours had passed in the outside world, and the surroundings had become dark. But at this moment, except for Zhu Zhuking's constant muffled sounds, there was no other sound around, whether it was birdsong or beast roars. Uranium had already cleaned up the surroundings in advance, and would never let Zhu Zhuking be disturbed in the slightest. Finally, in front of Zhu Zhuking's strong willpower, all the soul ring energies in her body began to compromise, and the process of mutual absorption and transformation began. In her heart, there was a figure that kept moving forward in front of her. She ran and ran until her consciousness was almost blurred, but she could not catch up with the other party. She even stopped with her, and the distance between the two was getting farther and farther. The pillar that had been supporting her to move forward was the figure in front of her. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Zhu Zhuking understood that it was uranium. The reason for chasing the figure in front was very simple. She wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with uranium and face any enemy in any challenge together, instead of watching the other party's lonely and desolate back go farther and farther. But now, Zhu Zhuking saw hope. The fine beads of sweat stopped overflowing, and Zhu Zhuking's frowning brows also relaxed a little. A layer of light gray light began to quietly overflow from his body, echoing the gray breath that was constantly shrouded by the outside world. With the release of the gray light, the black light from the outside world suddenly tightened and directly sank into Zhu Zhuking's body. Such a huge energy immediately made Uranium's eyebrows jump. But what followed was a surprise that almost made him faint. Success. The gray airflow from the outside world was completely absorbed by Zhu Zhuking, and what followed was the cold figure sitting cross-legged inside. The hair that was originally shiny and smooth after the spirit possessed him was slightly gray, but it was not gray. Instead, it was more like the dark bloodthorn cat that Uranium had seen before, becoming steadily illusory, as if it did not exist. The two cat paws were covered with a layer of light gray, like gloves, but this grayness made Uranium feel a deadly sense of crisis that made his scalp tingle. Uranium immediately stepped back a little. He knew that this was because Zhu Zhuking herself could not control the power that had just been increased, which caused the soul power to overflow. With this level of soul power, it would be strange to be able to directly control the increased energy. Time passed little by little, and Uranium was waiting for Zhu Zhuking to wake up. 1 hour passed, and then 2 hours passed. The sky gradually turned from dark to bright. Uranium, who was concentrating, had some swelling in his eyes at this moment, but he could still hold on. He was puzzled as to why he had not woken up after the absorption was completed. Suddenly, a low groan startled Uranium, who was nervous, and he looked up quickly. Zhu Zhuking groaned in a daze. Her whole body seemed to be constantly massaged in a hot spring, and the experience of absorbing the soul ring just now was swept away. At this moment, only endless comfort remained, as if she had reached the peak of bliss. The eyes were hazy, as if covered by a layer of white gauze, and various feelings gradually returned to her body. As her mind gradually cleared up, the scenery in front of Zhu Zhuking gradually became clear. The body felt indescribably comfortable, as if every cell in the body was cheering. Zhu's Huking. Uranium couldn't help but call softly. The sudden voice startled Zhu's Huking. This voice was too familiar and too profound to her. Subconsciously, she looked in the direction where the voice came from. Just then, she saw Uranium looking at her with a worried face, with messy hair and red eyes. Zhu's Huking's body trembled violently, and she immediately stood up, regardless of her whole body's weakness, and opened her arms in the direction of Uranium to embrace Uranium's body. Uranium immediately hugged Zhu's Huking's body with her backhand, and a sense of solidity like a mountain surged into her heart. The girl hugged Uranium tightly, sobbing. "I'm so scared. To be honest, I was crying when I wrote this chapter. I had a severe high fever when I was in elementary school. I was confused at the time. It was the feeling of consciousness disappearing, the body disappearing, and the feeling of being surrounded by vast white fog. After it was dispelled, it was all a bottomless abyss." Chapter 184, Shining like a meteor in the sky. The strongest soul skill at the limit. "I'm here." Gently patting Zhu's Huking's back, Uran finally let go of his constant worry. Uran couldn't help but tear up, and all his worries melted away at this moment. He once thought that the reason why he helped Zhu's Huking so much was because there was some kind of telepathy between Zhu's Huking and him, which could stabilize his mental state, so he had been supporting her behind Zhu's Huking. However, it was not until he found out yesterday that Zhu's Huking was in danger of death that he suddenly realized. It was not because Zhu's Huking could stabilize his mental state that he supported her. It was because of the bond between him and Zhu's Huking, the tacit understanding of their gestures, and their companionship that made his mental state better. It was the bond created by companionship. It was the strongest emotion that could not be replaced by anything. During this tormenting time, in his heart, nothing was more important than Zhu's Huking's life. "I'm alive, don't worry," Zhu's Huking said with a sob. She found that in her heart, there was no figure that could compare to you, whether it was the tribe members who once regarded her as dead, or the tyrannical, so-called fiancé. It turned out that the other party had existed in her heart for so long and had taken such deep roots. She had been avoiding it before, because she was a member of the Zhu family, and even if she died, she would still be Daimyo's fiancé, but at this moment, she faced her heart and found that it had already been filled by the person in front of her. There was not a single vacancy. "It's okay, I'll take care of everything." Yu hugged the girl tighter. He was really afraid that he would bring Zhu's Huking to catch soul beasts, pick the soul beasts by himself, and send them to her. In the end, he could only watch the girl die in front of him in despair. He was killing Zhu's Huking with his own hands. He didn't dare to think about this scene, he would collapse. "Next time, the soul beasts won't be so strong, I will pick them well for you." He patted Zhu's Huking on the back and said softly, "I want to catch up with you quickly." Zhu's Huking shook her head, buried her head in his chest, and hugged her tighter. For the first time, she felt that Uranium was right beside her. So nice. After the two of them hugged each other for a full quarter of an hour, Zhu's Huking reluctantly let go of the hand that almost broke Uranium's lumbar vertebrae. "Okay, don't rush to feel the soul skills, let's go home first, you have a good rest first, and we'll talk about it tomorrow when you're free." Uranium saw that Zhu's Huking wanted to feel his soul skills, and immediately spoke. "There is no need to stay here. In order to guard against the terrifying soul beasts that may appear at any time, he didn't sleep all night and was nervous. At this time, he was already a little tired, but now he is still holding on. He has collected the torso soul bone and will fuse it with Zhu's Huking later. The soul ring and soul bone are simply like adding wings to a tiger. Generally speaking, after a soul master absorbs a soul ring, he can feel what the new soul skill is, just like Oscar immediately knew his third sausage soul spell after absorbing the third soul ring. Zhu's Huking suffered too much unreality and pain in the process of absorbing the soul ring, so that he spent the second half of the absorption and transformation process in a daze, but he could not calm down to feel everything that the third soul ring brought her. The girl heard it and immediately moved, but as her body moved, Zhu's Huking's figure immediately appeared several meters away, as if teleporting. "Has my speed increased so much?" Zhu's Huking looked down at her body in disbelief. With the appearance of the third soul ring, her body lines seemed to become more harmonious, and the whole person looked more curvy. Whether it was her chest or her buttocks, it seemed to be fuller and rounder, and her feminine characteristics became more perfect. Even her fair skin seemed to be as smooth as water at this moment. In front of Uranium, This 12-year-old girl had a greater mind than an adult woman. Whether it was temperament or figure, she was far ahead of other people of the same age and non-payers. Zhu Xiuqing, come and run with me. As soon as the voice fell, a smile rose on the corner of his mouth, and he ran directly in the direction he came from. After a few flashes, he completely disappeared in the woods. There were still explosive traps around, but Zhu Xiuqing no longer took them seriously. She completely absorbed this third soul ring, and even without actual combat, she could still release it freely. I will catch up with you. The girl's words seemed to have a meaning, but Uranium was no longer around, so naturally she couldn't hear what she was saying. Like Uranium, after a few jumps, he left the original place directly, and continued to speed up along the previous direction. The dark bloodthorn cat is also an extremely fast soul beast, and like Zhu Xiuqing, it is a cat-type martial spirit. Naturally, in terms of speed, it adds the most layers to Zhu Xiuqing. Uranium did not use all his strength, but deliberately controlled the same speed as Zhu Xiuqing to run away and advance. He wanted to see how Zhu Xiuqing, who had obtained the third soul ring and whose physical fitness had greatly improved, would perform. Suddenly, a breeze passed by. The gentle wind blew Uranium's hair. Without the radiation eye spirit, Uranium could only see a flash of phantom, but when he turned on his spirit, it was too late. I caught up with you. A cold voice came from the tree and fell into Uranium's ears. Uranium immediately looked up and saw a tall girl sitting on the branch, swinging her legs, and her snow-white skin seemed to be fragile. Then the second round. Uranium pondered for a while and suddenly said. Then, he stomped his feet heavily, like an arrow from a string, and shot away quickly into the distance. The two began a silent race in the forest. Zhu Xiuqing did not notice that her speed would suddenly increase after she passed through the shadow, but she just thought it was because she did not control her strength well, so she ignored it. The way home is very long. The distance from the original waterfall position will be engraved with a mark after Uranium comes out. Now, it has been more than a month since it came out, and it is impossible to return home within 3 or 5 days. The two chased each other for a long time, and they stopped after a full hour. How is it? Have you adapted to it? Under the sun, under the shade of a tree, you leaned against the tree and asked Zhu Xiuqing on the side. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. Yes. The girl nodded gently, and then suddenly thought of something. This third soul skill, I think you need to take a look. Okay, let me see what soul skill the dark bloodthorn cat brings to you. You nodded with interest, then stood up and stepped back a few steps. Zhu Xiuqing nodded, looked around, and chose a position between two trees. At this time, she released her martial spirit and her 3 soul rings were moving in an orderly rhythm. 2 yellow and 1 purple, the third purple, even a little black, but not very conspicuous. Under the urging of soul power, the third soul ring suddenly shone, and the bright purple light permeated the whole body, covering the light of the other 2 rings. Uranium nodded secretly. The soul power fluctuations that came from the faint were very strong, at least about 7,000 years. It seems that the soul power of 5,000 years that he estimated was not very accurate. Zhu Xiuqing's nether spirit cat and dark bloodthorn cat have a high degree of integration. Zhu Xiuqing raised her right hand with a solemn face. The gray light in her palm shone brightly, and the soul power of her whole body was released. The invisible pressure made the low bushes around her tremble. The next moment, under the shade of the tree, her body suddenly became illusory with the shining of the soul ring. Then, a layer of gray light more than 1 foot long was attached to Zhu Xiuqing's right cat claw, extending from the back of her hand, like a light blade unsheathed. Buzz! The faint space fluctuations came. In just 5 seconds, Zhu Xiuqing's face turned pale, obviously because of excessive energy consumption. As if realizing that time was running out, Zhu Xiuqing immediately started to move, and gently wiped the tree next to him with his right hand. The arm did not touch it, only the gray light touched the big tree. But the tree was instantly within Uranium's senses. Dead. Zhu Xiuqing immediately retracted her third soul skill. Her face was pale, sweat dripped like soybeans. She held her knee with one hand and gasped for breath. It can be seen that the consumption was so great that she had used up all the soul power in her body. Uranium, how about this soul skill? Zhu Xiuqing did not carefully observe the condition of the big tree, but asked Uranium. But Uranium was stunned in place, and did not come back to his senses for a long time. Uranium. Seeing this, the girl immediately walked forward and fanned in front of his eyes. The next moment, Zhu Huking, who was close to him, was suddenly hugged by uranium. This time, it was Zhu Huking who was stunned. Zhu Huking. Do you know? Your third soul skill is unique and the strongest soul skill. Uranium released his arms from Zhu Huking, climbed his hands on her shoulders and swayed wildly. I saw it. That gray light is a special fault. The power of cutting through space. It can cut into pieces anything, no matter what kind of martial spirit it is, it can be cut in half. And that illusory figure is clearly the talent of the Dark Bloodthorn Cat, the Shadow World. Do you know? This means that you will always be invincible. Shadow World, P.S. Please support the official version of Kitty and Chinese website. The third update is over. Going to bed. Regarding the relationship between the two, I suggest you take another look at Longsing City. I remember I had foreshadowed it. Chapter 185 Soul Ring and Soul Bone. Zhu Huking's face turned pale after her figure blurred, obviously because she had consumed too much energy. This was Zhu Huking's third soul skill, the Dark Destruction Spirit Body. Zhu Huking, tell me how you feel about this soul skill. Uranium asked Zhu Huking while looking at the tree carefully. But before he could touch the tree, its upper part naturally fell backwards. Uranium saw with sharp eyes that although it was only lightly touched by Zhu Huking's gray light, the fracture was very smooth, as if an invisible blade cut any object it touched at the atomic level. Zhu Huking also looked at the fallen tree and said calmly, after I absorbed the Dark Destruction Bloodthorn Cat Soul Ring, this third soul skill appeared. According to my feelings about this soul skill, it has several characteristics. The girl paused while thinking and sorted out her thoughts. First of all, it consumes a lot of soul power. With my current soul power of level 30, I can only support it for 6 to 7 seconds at most, and then my whole body's soul power will be exhausted. It can be said that the soul power consumed is far more than the normal level 30 purple soul skill. Second, this soul skill is activated instantly. You only need to express the idea of wanting to enter the dark soul body in your mind, and you will enter instantly. It is even faster than the speed at which the third soul ring lights up, but it still requires the possession of the martial soul. Third, after I entered the dark soul body, an illusory state appeared all over my body, just like the shadow world of the Dark Bloodthorn Cat you mentioned. At that time, I felt that my body was light and I couldn't touch my body, like a ghost, and I might not be attacked or hurt. And then, a gray edge appeared on my hand, extending from the back of my hand. Fourth, in my feeling, every time I pass a dark place, a force will surge from my whole body, and my speed, strength, and soul power recovery speed will all increase. After speaking, Zhu Huking closed his eyes and thought carefully about whether there was anything he had missed. It should be gone. Uranium nodded slightly. It should be almost done. Let's continue testing this soul skill of yours tomorrow to see how long it can last, whether you will be harmed during the duration, and the cutting power of the gray edge. Zhu Huking said, the amplification of the third soul ring, in my opinion, will not be achieved when standing under the shade of this tree or under the sun. It will only appear in the shadow. I think this may be related to the soul beast. As long as I stand in a place without light, I am equivalent to turning on the amplification state. Uranium nodded, that's right. The talent of this soul beast has these characteristics. I guess your soul skill is also its talent, but it lasts less and consumes a lot of soul power. But in battle, even 1 or 2 seconds of invincibility is enough. This killer is terribly powerful. Zhu Huking suddenly frowned and asked in confusion, but in this way, if it is used as a killer, I will lose a commonly used combat soul skill for no reason compared to others. Will it? The next moment, the girl suddenly realized, you're right. A soul skill that consumes so much energy is not suitable for ordinary combat soul skills. At this time, Uranium had an idea. Zhu Huking, what do you think? If your opponent swings a knife at you in a normal battle, and you activate your third soul skill, the virtual soul skill, and stab him unexpectedly with your backhand, how much advantage will this bring you? Or, turn it on when you are about to be attacked, and turn it off when you don't need it, so as to save soul power consumption. What do you think? Seeing Uranium say this, Zhu Huking nodded thoughtfully, but this still needs to be tested. If it is a state soul skill that cannot be stopped once it is activated, then you can only hold it in your hand. Otherwise, once you use the soul skill, the soul power of the whole body will be drained. By the way, I think I have time now, why don't you take a look at this thing? Suddenly, Uranium's face showed some indescribable excitement. While speaking, Uranium slowly took out a small shaped spine from behind, with a complete sternum, cervical bone and waist bone. This bone is silver gray and exudes a strong soul power fluctuation. It is obviously a soul bone. This is it. The girl looked at the extra soul bone in Yu's hand, which was emitting strong soul power fluctuations, with her eyes wide open and a look of disbelief. This is the soul bone left by the dark blood thorn cat. Take it. The soul bone is matched with a soul ring. Only you can absorb the energy of the soul bone to the maximum extent. Although he had a soul bone in his hand, Yu didn't have any thoughts at the moment. He even thought it was interesting to use the soul bone to tease Zhu Xiuqing. He had been living in the forest. There was no teacher to teach him, and no one told him how precious soul bones were. He also had one, so he naturally wouldn't treat the soul bone as a treasure for fear that others would know. But he was not a fool. If the person in front of him was not Zhu Xiuqing, he would definitely not reveal these. Unless, let the dead keep the secret for him. Although the soul bone in front of him was very tempting, Zhu Xiuqing just shook her head calmly and took the lead in expressing her opinion. Uranium, I already have a very strong soul skill. You have worked the hardest during this period. You take it and I give it up. As she said that, she turned her head away, closed her eyes and prepared to take a good rest. But the next moment, Uranium directly stuffed the soul bone into Zhu Xiuqing's hand and said seriously, soul bone, soul ring is the most suitable, this is yours. Moreover, I already have a soul bone, although it is not a torso bone, but it is enough. The two sat cross-legged opposite each other. Uranium's hand was supporting it from below, and the other hand placed the soul bone on the back of Zhu Xiuqing's hand to show her determination. It was silky smooth, like jelly, and seemed to have a slight elasticity. This was Uranium's first feeling. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. At this moment, the two were silent at the same time. Let's get started. I'll protect you. Without allowing Zhu Xiuqing to refute, Uranium spoke directly and forcefully. As he spoke, the silver-haired young man took the initiative to stand up and walk towards the outside world, leaving Zhu Xiuqing alone, sitting there blankly, looking at the torso soul bone in his hand with the silver-gray aura at a loss. This is the top torso soul bone among soul bones. Why did Uranium give it to me? The value of the soul bone was so great that Zhu Xiuqing did not dare to make any moves. She just held it in her palm and let the soul bone emit rich soul power fluctuations. After sitting there blankly for a quarter of an hour, Uranium's voice suddenly came. Don't sit there stupidly, absorb it quickly. Zhu Xiuqing quickly raised her head, looked in the direction of Uranium, and said seriously, thank you. These two words, she said very hard. 2 updates today, I have to sort them out carefully. Chapter 186 Ringing the Bell of the Forest's Doomsday. Zhu Xiuqing sat there holding the silver-gray dark bloodthorn cat, mobilizing the soul power that had just broken through to induce the soul bone to merge with himself. As the soul power fluctuations were slowly injected into the dark bloodthorn cat's trunk soul bone, the gray light on the trunk soul bone suddenly became stronger. In just a moment, it enveloped Zhu Xiuqing's body, emitting a gray glow. The reason why soul bones are more precious than soul rings is that in addition to being difficult to obtain, there is another more important reason that there is no soul power limit for absorbing soul bones. In other words, if you are lucky enough to get it, you can also absorb a soul bone of 100,000 years when you only have level 1 soul power. Therefore, Zhu Xiuqing absorbed a soul bone dropped by a soul beast with a cultivation level of 10,000 years. Unlike the previous narrow escape from death, with the support of the soul ring, it is even safer than when he absorbed the dark bloodthorn cat's soul ring, and there is no danger to his life. It can be clearly seen that the trunk bone melted under the effect of her soul power and turned into a pool of silver-gray liquid that slowly seeped into her chest. Wrapped in the black light, the first thing Zhu Xiuqing felt was a trace of cold soul power fluctuation injected into her body. It was a kind of energy fluctuation that made her feel very comfortable. Her body was cheering with joy, as if the soul bone and she were originally one. The cool breath penetrated directly from the thoracic vertebrae, gradually stimulating her upper body, and then began to move downwards to the coccyx. Wherever it passed, the whole body seemed to be gradually opened up. That wonderful sense of transparency was a comfort that Zhu Xiuqing had never felt before. Uranium watched from the side, listening to her unconscious moaning, and her face couldn't help but blush. At this moment, she felt like she was floating in the air. She had never experienced such a comfortable and wonderful feeling before, as if her originally imperfect body was gradually evolving, but it didn't seem like evolution, but a special feeling. It was a perfect fusion. What Zhu Yuqing couldn't see was that although she was experiencing such a wonderful feeling, the sternum and ribs inside her body were gradually stained with a layer of dull gray that could not be wiped off, and was even gradually penetrating into her bone marrow. For no reason, the girl felt a slight pain. But this pain came and went quickly, as if it was an illusion. Buzz, as the gray breath became less and less, a slight buzzing sound sounded, and Zhu Yuqing felt that her body trembled slightly, and then, the cool breath quietly penetrated into her chest from all directions. Cool, comfortable, without any hindrance. The girl was immersed in the last breath. In the gentle energy fluctuation, Zhu Yuqing felt that the soul power in her body was gently fluctuating due to the special traction it transmitted. With each fluctuation, the surrounding air would become a little lighter. The soul power did not increase significantly, but it became purer. Uranium saw it clearly, and Zhu Yuqing and the dark bloodthorn cat became more and more similar. It was just not the temperament or appearance, but the feeling of being integrated with a shadow. She clearly saw that her own figure had become a little erratic, but it was not the kind of disappearance, but a more alternative, body transformation. I remember that the final stage of the dark bloodthorn cat should be the shadow realm, right? Could it be? Seeing this, Uranium's face changed. Gradually, Zhu Yuqing lost herself in the refreshing feeling all over her body. She was like flowing in a warm ocean, like a young swallow returning to its nest. Everything in the shadow was open to Zhu Yuqing. The girl had lost her sense of everything around her. The gray airflow spreading outside her body had completely merged into her body. The cool and gentle breath was the shadow under the tree, gently comforting the girl on her way home. It's very likely that there won't be a second dark bloodthorn cat of this level. I originally thought it was just a stronger soul beast, but look at it now. It's ridiculously strong. If this kind of illusory and solid feeling is not deliberately locked, or it's a large range, I'm afraid any single skill will have a certain probability of failing, just like ZU of the Golden Generation. But hers is even more powerful. It's worthy of being the strongest torso soul bone, and it's a combination of soul rings and soul bones. This is the first time I've seen something so strong. Uranium smiled with relief. It was a good thing for Zhu Yuqing to have such a strong ability to protect herself. The stronger she was, the happier he was. Zhu Yuqing carefully felt the endless warmth coming from the surroundings, and finally fell into deep sleep. Shadow is her home. And she is at home. The soul bone of the dark bloodthorn cat was finally completely absorbed by Zhu Yuqing's body, and the color of her bones also changed, with a faint silver-gray luster, full of texture, and seemed to contain endless power. This soul bone is the essence condensed from the whole body of the dark bloodthorn cat. And after it was condensed, it instantly exploded into powder, forming the most primitive shadow airflow, obliterating existence and soul. In the end, it was absorbed by Zhu Yuqing's soul ring, and the remaining largest energy turned into soul bone. Trunk soul bone. Uranium looked at the girl lying on the ground with a smile on her lips, and somehow she laughed. Suddenly, Uranium's face changed. Oh no. Only she can open the Space Soul Guide. What should I eat tonight? There is no soul beast around. I don't know if it was scared away or something happened. Uranium and Zhu Yuqing chased each other in the forest, but they didn't see any soul beasts. Although this is a 10,000-year soul beast area, it shouldn't be possible to not see even 100-year soul beasts and 10-year soul beasts as food, right? It feels like the soul beasts in the entire area disappeared after Zhu Yuqing absorbed the soul ring and have never been seen again. The latest novels are first published on the 6th book bar. Even the birds are gone. It's a big problem. Let's go now, otherwise it may be too late. It's really a ghost. Uranium felt a sense of uneasiness in his heart. Without hesitation, he immediately carried the sleeping girl on his back. The heavy fruit suddenly hit his back, which made Zhu Yuqing's face freeze. It's so big, what if it gets crushed? Time waits for no one, and Uranium immediately put away his dark thoughts. Somehow, it seemed that something was wrong with him since the hug yesterday. Let's go. With a low shout, a bandage tied Zhu Yuqing's whole body to him, freeing his hands for fighting. The next moment, Uranium looked in the direction, and his martial soul radiation eye was activated, and his second soul skill, the extreme nuclear energy reaction, was activated. Then, He shot out violently. This place is really like a ghost forest, and I don't know what is nearby. An hour later, the forest made a rustling sound, and the leaves rubbed against each other, constantly making crisp sounds. 1. 2. Different individuals, different ages, and even figures that hated each other appeared from the lush forest. Although they were of different sizes and their soul power fluctuations were also very strong, there were many soul beasts of 10,000 years, and even those close to 50,000 years old were among the group of soul beasts with stiff steps. Although they were all soul beasts competing for different positions, at this moment, they all had one thing in common. Eyes that were eager for blood. Eyes that were dissipating their minds. A large iron-gray flower with scarlet veins was held in the hand of an old man in the distance, swaying gently. Well, the update is done. 2 updates today. Chapter 187 Uranium vs. Zuzyuking. She slept very deeply, and her face was no longer cold, but with a sweet smile. This sleep lasted for 3 whole days. And Uranium did not rest for 3 whole days. They had returned to the camp, and countless traps were set up around. No matter which ground soul beasts or underground soul beasts wanted to raid the safe area in the center, they would have to pass through layers of traps and minefields. Although there were soul beasts seeking death outside constantly triggering the first layer of traps, there were still 9 layers away from the real core area, and each layer was more than 10 meters. It can be said that Uranium has developed the word sneak to the extreme. Moreover, during Zuzyuking's coma, Uranium was still expanding the trap area. His wish was to ensure that the area within a radius of 10 miles was all minefields, making it difficult for soul beasts to move. Only in this way could he sleep peacefully. But unfortunately, the area within a radius of 10 miles was more than 70 square kilometers, which was the same size as 10 standard football fields. If he wanted to achieve this point, it might take him half a year. 3 days later, Zuzyuking slowly woke up with a strange feeling of coolness all over her body. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she saw was Uranium, who was sitting there and stroking the belt of his soul guide. The white and blue soul guide and belt were placed on both sides of him, and there was a pale white handkerchief next to them. It was obvious that he had just wiped these 2 pieces of equipment. Are you awake? Uranium looked at Zuzyuking calmly. After 3 days of calmness, he no longer had the distracted attitude of the past few days and returned to his previous calmness. Uranium. When Zuzyuking called out this word, she suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. When she looked down, she found that there was a thin layer of pulp on the surface of her skin, which was light gray, but only her face did not have this strange feeling. Get up and wash it. This time, you have been completely reborn. I think, with your current situation, ordinary soul masters are not your opponents. You are even qualified to touch soul lords. This is a torso soul bone, the top soul bone, not to mention the combination of soul rings and soul bones like the dark blood thorn cat. With the help of Uranium, Zuzyuking stood up with some difficulty. Zuzyuking looked a little strange, and she didn't know how to start. Seeing Zuzyuking like this, Uranium couldn't help but smile and waved her hand, saying, "No need to thank me, just go and wash yourself first." As she said that, Uranium pointed to the pool of water beside her. Yet, the girl blushed slightly and nodded slowly. Then, she pushed open the wooden door and walked towards the direction of the roaring water pool waterfall. The camp at this moment has changed a lot compared to 2 months ago. The first thing is the small wooden house standing in the center of the camp. It's called a wooden house, but it's not small. It's rectangular in shape, about 50 square meters, with 2 rooms, a living room and dining room, and an open kitchen. The rooms are side by side, the kitchen and the living room are opposite, and the entrance is in the middle. The walls are made of wood chips cut from logs as partitions, and the door is hinged by vines. The hinges of the kitchen cabinet door are the same. Soon, the 2 of them left the camp. Zuzyuking washed her body in the waterfall. When she left with Uranium, she clearly felt the changes in her body. The whole person seemed to have lost weight. As long as he exerted his body, he felt like he was about to fly. The skills given to him by her dark blood thorn cat not only strengthened her affinity with the shadow world, but also allowed her to enter the shadow world and shuttle through it with very little soul power consumption. Just like the dark blood thorn cat had fought with Uranium before, he appeared from under his shadow. If it weren't for Uranium's reaction speed and dynamic vision that was so strong under the amplification of the 3 Megatama, I'm afraid he would have been a cold corpse. That kind of interlaced spatial fault was not something his body could block, and the nuclear explosion kick was completely ineffective against this kind of illusory attack. The Dark Bloodthorn Cat almost completely defeated all of Uranium's skills, including nuclear radiation. Only the soul bones produced by such a terrifying soul beast can produce such a superb soul skill. But unfortunately, it was not in a complete state after all, and it was also very arrogant. It appeared directly in the daytime and fought with Uranium. It did not sneak into the shadow world to attack and harass, but did it openly. It didn't even know that as long as it waited until night fell, under its attack, Uranium would surely die, with no chance of survival. Uranium, this soul bone I got has a skill. As the two walked, Zhu's Huking closed his eyes and felt it carefully. Soul bones all have skills. Come and try it. Let me see how strong you are now. Don't be afraid of hurting me. Fight with all your strength. Uranium nodded, and then said seriously. He knew that Zhu's Huking's soul skills might be able to completely ignore any attack and any defense, but he had to try how powerful it was. At worst, he still had the soul bone world to stop time to ensure that he would not die suddenly. The two stopped talking. Then, they looked at each other and retreated to the back, leaving enough space for both sides to come out. Although it was daytime at this moment, Uranium keenly discovered that the surroundings were blocked by the dense branches and leaves of the tree canopy, naturally forming an area with a lot of shadows. Have you already planned it? The latest novel is published on 69 Shuba. Uranium looked at Zhu's Huking, whose lips were slightly raised, and couldn't help asking. Zhu's Huking didn't answer, but muttered to herself. Netherworld Spirit Cat, possess. After Zhu's Huking's martial soul, the Netherworld Spirit Cat possessed her. Zhu's Huking's eyes changed color at the same time. The left eye was dark green, the right eye was clear blue, and the long hair on her head naturally fell on her back, but it was very illusory, as if there was nothing. Even her body, in the shadow, unconsciously faded a little. Eye of radiation destruction, open. Compared to Zhu's Huking's fear of a great enemy, Uranium seemed much more relaxed, with one hand on her waist, looking indifferent. Black and yellow pupils appeared in his eyes, and began to rotate slightly in a certain direction, but the speed was extremely slow, which indicated that he had not entered a high combat state. Go, fight with all your strength. Looking at Zhu's Huking, who was ready, the boy took a step back, raised his right hand, turned halfway, changed his gestures, and challenged Zhu's Huking to fight. The battle began. Zhu's Huking took a deep breath, her feet trembled slightly, her body tense up, and a pair of cat paws slowly raised to her eyes, with a faint gray light attached to the cat paws, looming. The next moment, accompanied by a forward movement, Zhu's Huking's figure disappeared in an instant. As her body moved, she brought a series of faint phantoms, making it difficult for people to capture her exact location. Zhu's Huking's timing of attack was perfect, just when he had just raised his hand to challenge, and his arm did not fall back to defend and became slack and weak. Pie time. Recommend a book, a Douluo fanfiction written by a friend, on Uchiha of Douluo World. Here is the introduction. There are no yin soldiers crossing the border, only a group of bald men carrying heavy loads forward. A bald man who died suddenly due to the activity of a Liverichi rat was reborn in a popular anime. Looking at the golden talisman in his hand, he would roar like a groundhog even if he died. Oh my. It's my. It's oh my. Douluo fanfiction, YY from a great African yin-yang master. Chapter 188. The Uncaptured Figure. Almost instantly, Zhu's Huking's figure appeared in front of Uranium after a blur. The cat's claws were slightly raised, and a sharp claw strike with a faint gray light came in an instant. But Uranium just jumped back lightly, and then suddenly stopped, as if without any inertia. He pinched Zhu's Huking's neck with one hand. But Zhu's Huking and Uranium have known each other for so long, so he naturally understood that it was impossible for him to attack Uranium under normal circumstances. This time, the first attack was more to create a flaw. Zhu's Huking's speed was very fast. Almost when Uranium's wrist came in front of him, he had already slid sideways, and the cat's claws were lifted up, passing through the faint light in an irresistible posture. But the next moment, Uranium caught his wrist, and all the power dissipated instantly. Caught. Without hesitation, Uranium increased his hand strength, followed the force, and directly twisted Zhu's Huking's arm. Suddenly, the tightly grasped body suddenly disappeared. A sense of emptiness followed Uranium's astonishment. In front of him, in just a moment, Zhu's Huking's figure disappeared. Uranium felt a little uneasy for no reason. This situation was not like the third soul skill, which at least had a faint shadow. Without staying in place, after realizing that Zhu Zhuking's disappearance was not right, Uranium immediately stomped his left foot heavily, and rushed forward like a spring. The next moment, the ominous premonition in the boy's heart reached its maximum. A strong sense of threat came from below, right in the shadow. A faint black light mixed with a girl's outstretched arm, directly hitting Uranium's head. Uranium, who was jumping, saw Zhu Zhuking's body getting closer and closer, and couldn't help but grit his teeth. The figure in the air suddenly turned, and the movement was smooth, without any sense of awkwardness, as if ignoring the gravitational potential energy. After escaping from the most deadly and dangerous situation, Yu's legs landed on the ground. He saw Zhu Zhuking's second soul ring glowing brightly from the corner of his eyes. He stomped the ground again, did a backflip, supported himself with one hand, and flipped again. Zhu Zhuking was not idle. Seeing Yu getting farther and farther away, the two yellow soul rings attached to her body also lit up at the same time. The pupils in her eyes, one blue and one green, suddenly stood up. She rushed forward silently, her body instantly soared into the air, and the whole person was wrapped in soul power in the air, spinning rapidly towards Yu's direction. In her bulging figure, claws appeared one after another. It was her second soul ring skill, the Netherworld 100 Claws. With a rapid rotation of her body and the sharp penetrating attack power of the cat's claws, she attacked the enemy hundreds of times in a very short period of time, and attacked the same position, with extremely amazing power. Just as Uranium fell on the tree, Zhu Zhuking's Netherworld claws hid him. The Netherworld claws were like a rapidly rotating sawtooth gear, quickly cutting Uranium's blocked arm, making a jingling sound and the harsh sound of cutting metal. Ha! Seeing that the fine steel wrist guard was about to be scratched by Zhu Zhuking's cat claws, Uranium immediately exerted force with both arms to forcibly stop Zhu Zhuking's movements, suddenly threw his hands, took the initiative to attack, and hit Huanglong with a heavy punch. But the real feeling of hitting the flesh did not come. Zhu Zhuking suddenly disappeared in the Netherworld claws in midair. The next moment, Uranium sensed something, and resisted the discomfort of the heavy punch just now. His right leg suddenly jumped up like lightning, and kicked the void behind him with a side kick. In the air, Zhu Zhuking's figure appeared, but before Uranium kicked Zhu Zhuking, the girl's third soul ring shone brightly, and Uranium's side kick immediately missed. Visibly, Uranium's powerful kick burst out a strong wind, and the fallen leaves on the ground were blown up one after another, but it only passed through Zhu Zhuking's illusory figure, and no more power was released. At this time, when the old power was gone and the new power had not yet been born, Zhu Zhuking's eyes suddenly flashed. But a grey light blade suddenly extended from the back of Zhu Zhuking's hand. Without hesitation, the girl raised her arm and gently wiped along Uranium's thigh. In mid-air, the light blade cut through the space, cutting off everything passing by, and steadily and powerfully cut towards Uranium's thigh. As Uranium said, she would not hold back at all, because she believed that Uranium was stronger than herself and definitely had a way to deal with her soul skill. Sure enough, it seemed that there was a trance around, and Uranium's figure disappeared directly in front of Zhu Zhuking's eyes, and inexplicably came to 10 meters away. The light blade chopped into the air, and then the illusory image on the girl disappeared, revealing the entity. She has already tested that the third soul skill can be released and closed freely. Uranium's face was a little ugly, and his eyes were fixed on the back of Zhu Zhuking's hand where the light blade had dissipated. His heart was tightened, and he couldn't help but feel lucky for himself 2 months ago. It was really too terrifying. Fortunately, he didn't directly engage in close combat with the dark bloodthorn cat, otherwise he wouldn't know when his head would fall off. Zhu Zhuking's elusive teleportation almost made all his attacks miss. Even if he reacted in advance, Zhu Zhuking could activate the third soul skill and backhand him in a state where she couldn't dodge. Is Zhu Zhuking already so difficult? Uranium thought to himself. He just relied on the soul bone world to save the situation, otherwise he would have almost no time to retract his legs with such a close slash. The two continued to confront each other. There is no doubt that the moment before it disappeared and then appeared was the soul skill of the torso soul bone of the dark bloodthorn cat. Uranium exhaled lightly, his eyes flickered for a while, and soon revealed a determined light. He clenched his palms, and then let go. The latest novels are first published on 69shu.com. 4 soul rings appeared and slowly began to circle. He did not use soul skills to deal with the Shrek 7 devils, but Zhu's Huking in front of him was definitely qualified for him to go all out. The second soul skill, Extreme Nuclear Energy Reaction, was activated. This time, Uranium was very vigilant in the active attack, and slowly started approaching Zhu's Huking, who was waiting for it step by step. He had to rely on the power and speed increased after activating the soul skills to ensure that he would not be injured suddenly. Although Zhu's Huking's bonus in the shadow was not as good as his physical fitness, it was already the best among the soul masters. If Zhu's Huking faced Tame Yubei, there was no doubt that she could completely beat Tame Yubei. Just relying on this third soul skill that seemed to be 1,000 years old, but was actually 10,000 years old. Closer, closer. The distance between Uranium and Zhu's Huking kept getting closer. Zhu's Huking still did not enter the virtual state, perhaps because she felt that she had to use it at a critical moment, or perhaps because she wanted to lure him to reveal his flaws with her current physical appearance, and then get rid of him by shuttling between shadows. She seemed to have no intention of moving against the approaching Uranium. But just as Uranium was about to approach, the girl's figure suddenly blurred for a while. Then, the boy's face suddenly changed, and he turned quickly, facing Zhu's Huking, who suddenly appeared behind him. Seeing her first and second soul rings light up, Uranium directly raised one hand, with his palm in a claw shape, and took the initiative to grab Zhu's Huking. The third soul skill, the energy absorption halo, lights up. How to say it? The only thing that restricts Zhu's Huking's combat effectiveness is whether her soul power is enough, and it is obvious that her soul power is not enough. Chapter 189 Soul Bone Skill, Shadow Warp. This soul bone skill is so fucking troublesome. Soul power fluctuations were emanating from the air. Zhu's Huking, who used the soul skill, fell with flying claws, but no damage was caused. All the soul power was absorbed by the energy absorption aura, including the soul power in Zhu's Huking's body. After noticing the soul power overflowing from her body, Zhu's Huking's face changed drastically. Soul power is required to use soul bone skills, and the third soul skill is a big soul power consumer. If there is no soul power, then she is no different from an ordinary soul master, and even lacks a soul skill. Without hesitation, Zhu's Huking immediately activated the soul bone skill. This soul skill that only consumes soul power to instantly fold to the shadow place has no cooling time. It is simply too powerful. Except that the soul power consumed by folding increases with the distance, Zhu's Huking is very satisfied with everything else. Shadows are everywhere. Whether it is the shadow under Uranium's feet, the dim light around, or the reflection of the trees, they are all spaces that Zhu's Huking can fold to. Zhu's Huking's figure suddenly disappeared in the air. After absorbing nearly 1/10 of Zhu's Huking's soul power, Uranium slowly lowered his arms, staring at all the shadows around him, turning his eyes, and began to conceive ideas one by one in his mind. It is true that he could destroy all the plants around him and turn the battlefield into a flat land, thereby blocking Zhu's Huking's soul bone skills and leaving her with no place to use her strength. It is possible, but it is not necessary. He is now sparring with her to determine Zhu's Huking's combat effectiveness. This method of changing the surrounding battle pattern will be used to teach Zhu's Huking in the future to let her understand that she is not invincible. So, apart from this weakness, what other weaknesses does Zhu's Huking have? An inspiration came to his mind. But then, he shook his head and gave up. He just thought that he could make Zhu's Huking show up by consuming soul power, but he suddenly realized that he had missed the biggest opportunity. Just now, if the active effect of the energy absorption aura lasted a little longer, Zhu's Huking would not have much soul power, but now, she should have been prepared. At the moment when Uranium was thinking, a black light faintly stung Uranium's sixth sense. Suddenly, a gray illusory figure suddenly rose from under Uranium's feet. But what greeted her was a sweeping kick without any reservation. Shadow folding. The sweeping kick missed, and Zhu's Huking disappeared again, but this time, Uranium would not let her escape again. The fourth soul ring lit up. As the soul ring lit up, Uranium's eyes also lit up, but his expression was still dignified, without a trace of anxiety, only extremely calm. Sensing a certain direction, the silver-haired young man retreated directly and swept out with a violent burst of fluctuations towards the front. Zhu's Huking's reaction speed was extremely fast. Almost at the moment when the kick just appeared, the third soul ring was activated. The third soul skill, the Dark Soul Body. Although she avoided this burst kick, What followed was the rapid reduction of the soul power in Zhu Zhuking's body. The moment the burst kick was used, a gust of wind suddenly hung in the surrounding environment. Gravel, leaves, and green plants flew up immediately with a fluctuation of soul power, and thick white smoke instantly enveloped the surroundings. For a moment, Zhu Zhuking seemed to be in the midst of the valley, unable to see the direction around her. Uranium could not see Zhu Zhuking. And Zhu Zhuking, likewise, could not see Uranium. In this battlefield where both sides had lost their vision, her soul bone, Shadow Warp, lost its function. After all, she could not even see anyone, so naturally she did not know the direction of the warp. Soul bones were not omnipotent after all. They were just beyond the conventional soul skills, and they were not truly invincible. Unless this soul bone was at the 100,000-year level, it would not be enough to rely solely on the two cornerstones of the 10,000-year soul bone and the top-level gifted soul beast. At this time, in addition to dispersing the smoke and dust, the only thing that could be relied on was physical fitness. "I got you." Suddenly, a deep voice suddenly sounded from behind Zhu Zhuking. Without hesitation, Zhu Zhuking directly transformed into the dark spirit body, and the light blade on the back of her hand unfolded and swept away quickly. But what Uranium encountered, Zhu Zhuking finally failed. There was no one around, and she slashed with all her strength, but nothing was touched. A strong sense of discomfort of failure surged into her heart. The second weakness is that once the surroundings enter the restriction, she can only fall into passive engagement. No, can't she instantly warp outside? Uranium's radiation eyes directly penetrated the smoke and dust, thinking whether Zhu Zhuking could show strong psychological quality in the face of a natural combat environment. As soon as the voice fell, Zhu Zhuking in front of Uranium directly disappeared in the smoke and dust, which made Uranium, who was observing, look stiff. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. There is no doubt that she went out. Sure enough. With a slight sigh, Uranium rushed out directly, and the speed was so fast that it could set off a wave of excitement. Uranium rushed out of the range of the smoke and dust, looked around, and found the alert Zhu Zhuking. It can be clearly seen that Zhu Zhuking's face has become a little pale. After all, she had used her third soul skill 3 times, 4 or 5 shadow jumps, 2 netherworld claws and netherworld stabs, and Uranium had also absorbed her soul power. The reason why she didn't take action immediately after seeing me was probably because she only had a little soul power left. If she acted rashly, it would be like raising her hand and admitting defeat. Sure enough, this soul skill consumes so much energy that it is difficult to fight a protracted battle. Uranium's mind flashed this judgment quickly. Combined with the on-site analysis, it was probably close to the truth. Okay, the battle is over. You should have no soul power left, right? If you don't have soul power, you can't use soul bone skills and third soul skills. Uranium looked at Zhu Zhuking, who still wanted to continue fighting, and said loudly. As he said that, he put away the soul ring on his body and took the lead in canceling the combat state. It must be said that Zhu Zhuking's self-preservation ability opened his eyes. Even he couldn't beat her in one go, and there was even a risk of being killed. If it weren't for her level 30 soul power being too little, otherwise he would be very uncomfortable if they continued to consume each other. Uranium dares to guarantee that although Zhu Zhuking is not suitable for a protracted team battle, if it is a one-on-one battle, she can definitely beat anyone, except herself. After all, once the third soul skill is activated, she will be invincible for a certain period of time. At the same time, there is also that kind of gray space fold, plus the shadow-like shuttle to the opponent's shadow. This kind of sticky killing method, if your opponent attempts to solve the battle by escaping, then they will probably taste the taste of death immediately. Yet, Zhu Zhuking looked at Uranium and said so, and her heart was relieved, and she nodded slightly in response. Indeed, her soul power consumption is too great, and she can only solve the opponent through a short battle, but if she really fights and kills, the opponent may not be able to hold on to the back, let alone delay time. The Nether Spirit Cat, at this moment, truly lives up to the name of the Nether. The third update is over, and it's time to go to bed. To be honest, the soul bone is not really strong. Without a shadow, you can only warp to the opponent's shadow or the shadow of your teammates. It is completely useless in broad daylight, unless there is an artificial shadow area or night falls, otherwise the name of the soul bone soul skill is wasted. Although the soul skill is strong, it consumes soul power very much. Counting other soul skills, it is already too late to use it for 5 seconds. Once the 5 seconds are over, if you fail to kill the opponent, you must immediately run away and admit defeat. Otherwise, without soul power support, you may be seriously injured by the first soul skill of others. This is a double-edged sword. It kills people well, but it also kills you very quickly. Don't worry, when I design soul skills, the soul bone will definitely take rationality into consideration. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 190: The Possibility of Soul Fusion Technique. In the early morning, accompanied by the sound of birds chirping, Uranium woke up faintly on the bed. His mind was still a little fuzzy and he was in a state of confusion. But under his thin mattress, it was visible to the naked eye that there was a mass of things rising high, like an unyielding fighter standing up. Even though he had woken up, he still didn't seem to slow down. I seem to have reached the age of puberty, which is a bit difficult. Seeing all this, Uranium, who was still a little confused, couldn't help but smile awkwardly, then closed his eyes and lay back down again. Not long after, a slight snoring sound came. Uranium continued to turn over and took a nap. This is the 3rd month and 5 days of living in the forest. Since helping Zuzukin complete the soul skills and absorbing the soul bones, Uranium has begun to practice leisurely. In addition to going out to hunt game every day, the main task is to find the specific location of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire, as well as the ultimate purpose of this trip. Absorb the soul power of all the soul beasts in these forests and deduce your own power to the peak. Victory, then dominate. Somehow, there were fewer soul beasts around. Basically, Uranium spent a whole day wandering around, investigating the environment, and exploring the sunset forest. If we were to enter the next stage, it would probably be when the location of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire was determined. As the sun rose, bursts of rustling sounds gradually came from the cabin. Zuzukin had finished washing and started to prepare breakfast. And that sound was the sound of scooping water from the water tank. The vitality of the forest was gradually awakened. In fact, the noisy waterfall area was not suitable for camping and resting. The sound of water and rumbling was too loud, which greatly affected rest, and it would also cover the sound of some soul beasts walking, causing accidents in the camp. Moreover, people like Zuzukin, who had cat martial spirits, were particularly sensitive to sound, so she had considered living in another place. But Uranium's words refuted her idea. This kind of environment can effectively exercise endurance. Not long after, Uranium also got up. "What are you eating today?" As soon as he got up, Uranium yawned and looked at Zuzukin, who was busy. The girl did not look back, but continued to do what she was doing. "Add vegetables to the meat porridge." As she spoke, the girl stopped what she was doing, turned around and took out some wild vegetables picked from the surrounding forest from the Space Soul Guide, washed and chopped them, and put them into the meat porridge, adding a touch of pleasant green. The faint fragrance of vegetables mixed with a taste of meat lingered in the wooden house. Seeing Zuzukin so orderly, Uranium sat gently on the vine chair and began to sway gently, swaying back and forth, as if it was easy and free. Let's start a mental power confrontation tomorrow and get used to how to deal with opponents with mental power characteristics. The recent actual combat sparring should be over. After more than a month of beatings and sparring, Zuzukin's nerve reaction speed and actual combat ability have made a leap forward. He didn't dare to fight Zuzukin with all his strength, otherwise he would be in big trouble if he accidentally missed, but at this moment, with Zuzukin's soul skills and soul bones, if Uranium didn't use all his strength, he might not be able to do anything to her. This doesn't mean that Soul Sect can't beat Soul Lord. It's just that Zuzukin's buggy soul skills caused the current situation. As the two sides got deeper and deeper into the competition, Uranium could vaguely sense a kind of complementary aura from Zuzukin. This aura didn't exist before Zuzukin obtained the Soul Bone and Soul Ring. In other words, after Zuzukin obtained the Soul Ring and Soul Bone of the Dark Bloodthorn Cat, has the quality of her martial soul reached the threshold for a martial soul fusion skill with me? If it was an ordinary nether spirit cat, with my radiant eye, the top martial soul that was born with its own domain, it really couldn't be combined into a martial soul fusion skill. Uranium thought about the conditions for the birth of martial soul fusion skills and frowned. Compatibility of martial souls? Cats and eyes, martial souls that have nothing to do with each other, can also have this kind of compatibility? But maybe it's not enough, otherwise there wouldn't be only this vague feeling, and she doesn't seem to notice it herself. Maybe something is not enough. After guessing for a long time, breakfast was cooked. The two of them have been living this way for more than 3 months. It can be said that after the running in of life, he and Zhu Xiuqing have already had a tacit understanding, and Uranium can feel it. She seems to have let go of her knot. But he doesn't know what it is specifically, and he doesn't need to know. He just wants to become stronger now, become stronger, and make himself the top existence before the finale of Douluo Continent, and then ensure the continuation of the family. He actually thought about whether the family might be in this forest. So in the past month or so, he has been constantly wandering around looking for unusual places in the forest, and even things like catching 10,000-year soul beasts and applying radiation elements are just things he does casually. The latest novel is first published on the 6th-9th book bar. Going home is too important for him. Everything he does now is to go home and become stronger. Nothing else is important. Whether it is the Soul Master competition or the Royal Fighting Team, it doesn't matter. He wants to go home. But unfortunately, he searched for more than a month in the limited range around him, and finally confirmed that there was no trace of the family in his vicinity. He has reached the limit of the distance he can explore, which is within a day's round trip. If he wants to continue searching, he may not be able to rest in the camp. He needs to live outside to open up the road. Not long after, the two walked side by side to the front of the waterfall. Around it, there was an extremely empty open space. There were no traps around. The terrain was flat and the soil was dry. It was the battlefield specially prepared by Uranium. Looking at everything in front of him, Zhu Xiuqing gradually came back to his senses and looked at Uranium. Uranium walked up to her and said, "You have absorbed the combat experience of 30 days. Judging from your own situation and time, you are now only short of the last experience of fighting against spiritual masters, and I happen to be a spiritual master. Next, I will use a different combat method from the past. You have to pay attention. You will win as long as you remain undefeated." Undefeated? Zhu Xiuqing was surprised. Our spiritual master's so powerful. Uranium waved to Zhu Xiuqing, "It doesn't matter. Your special training starts now." As soon as the voice fell, Uranium raised his hand and motioned Zhu Xiuqing to look at him. Zhu Xiuqing didn't realize why, and immediately looked up and looked into Uranium's eyes. But the next moment, Zhu Xiuqing's originally clear black pupils suddenly showed 3 miniature fan-shaped icons. Under the black and yellow pupils, the 3 fan-shaped icons slowly rotated, which was exactly the same as the radiation eye martial spirit in Uranium's eyes at the moment. The girl's figure was stunned immediately, standing stiffly in place, with a dull look, as if she had lost her spirituality. This is the first lesson: never look directly into the eyes of any soul master. Today's update: I worked overtime until after 1 o'clock, and I don't have time to write. Sorry everyone. Chapter 191: Unpredictable Attack. After just a glance, the battle was over. It was very fast, but also reasonable. Although he didn't know how to perform normal pupil power manipulation or illusion control, with his 3 Magatama and the soul power of the 49th level Soul Master, it was easy to deal with an unprepared 30-level Soul Master with his huge pupil power. After Zhu Xiuqing stood there blankly for half a quarter of an hour, the 3 fan-shaped icons in Uranium's eyes slowly turned and retracted, releasing the control over Zhu Xiuqing. At this time, Zhu Xiuqing had been submerged in a cold ocean and could no longer feel anything around her, as if her body and soul had been separated, and she could not even feel the perception of her body. But she could clearly see everything in the outside world. This situation of being controlled by Uranium in an instant did not make her panic, but instead she felt that it was quite interesting. Is this what it feels like to be attacked by mental power? In fact, she didn't know. It was because Uranium didn't understand how to use illusions that she could only rely on her huge mental power mixed with her pupil power to attack her opponent's mind. However, Uranium didn't kill him, but only separated his mind and body, so Zhu Xiuqing saw everything now. If Uranium knew how to use illusions, then he could make his opponent fall into an illusion without knowing it. The opponent thought he was still fighting, but in fact he was standing there motionless. Or falling into the abyss of the hell, or burning forever in the hot hell, or being tortured by endless swords. This is an illusion. This kind of scene is in line with that sentence. You think you are fighting, but in fact it is just a mirage. When Zhu Zhuqing opened her eyes, the first thing she felt was that everything outside had changed. But then she closed her eyes and opened them again, and everything around her seemed to have not changed. Only she, who had just felt something unusual, had changed. How is it? I tend to be a control type, while most other spiritual masters are attack types. What do you want to say about this feeling? Looking at Zhu Zhuqing slowly waking up, there was a hint of curiosity in his tone. He only knew that the spiritual power of Hou Yu Hao in Douluo Continent and Tang Sen in this world were both of the spiritual impact type, but although the illusion that came with the Sharingan was also a spiritual attack, it was generally more inclined to control. So for Zhu Zhuqing, who was controlled by him, Yuan was very curious about what it felt like. Being asked by Yuan, Zhu Zhuqing had to stop and recollect her original thoughts. Her narrow and long autumn eyes, with a little laziness, squinted slightly, and looked at him lightly, but she said nothing. The feeling at that time was similar to being hit by an invisible force all over my body. It was very gentle, without any pain or discomfort, but in my opinion, I had been separated from my body into two individuals. I could only watch my body, but I could not feel anything. Looking at the curious young man, Zhu Zhuqing finally spoke. The girl's cold and indifferent voice made the fair face of the young man opposite him suddenly show a sense of understanding. Sure enough, I was controlling the huge soul power of the whole body to slowly attack, and the final result was to directly rush the person out of the body. Although it was a waste of mental power, the effect of illusion combined with mental power was very outstanding, which was completely different from the mental power attacks of other soul masters. After taking a deep breath in his heart, the smile on his face was bright and gentle. That's right, as long as he continues to dig deep into the infinite possibilities inside his body, he will become stronger and stronger. A person's strength is not determined by soul rings, soul bones, and soul skills, but there are more trump cards. And his mental power attack is his trump card. As soon as the idea of calculation flashed through his mind, Uranium immediately made a simple estimate based on what Zhu Zhuqing said in his own judgment. Due to the concentration of mental power, the soul exile produced was also extremely terrifying. And he guessed that the strength of the exile was related to his mental power output. What Uranium didn't know was that if there were titled Douluo present, they would probably be secretly shocked because of the strength of his mental power. The mental power that Uranium possessed at this time was actually close to the level of ordinary titled Douluo. This was definitely not a realm that a normal 3 Magatama Uchiha clan member could reach. Uranium, are you still going to continue? Zhu Zhuqing pursed her lips slightly, and her voice was flat without any fluctuations. Being urged by Zhu Zhuqing, Uranium's mouth twitched, but the smile on his face remained, and he stretched out his hand and hooked her. You were not prepared just now. Now, try again. As soon as the voice fell, Uranium's soul power was fully activated at this time, and his speed became extremely fast. When his feet danced, he actually felt a little blurry. However, just as he rushed towards Zhu Zhuqing, a faint sound came from the front, and then, a black light flashed in Zhu Zhuqing's hand, and a blade of light directly protected in front of him. Looking at Zhu Zhuqing, who suddenly activated the third soul skill, his face changed slightly, and the speed of his frantic running was quickly reduced. He stomped his feet heavily and moved directly to the side. Zhu Zhuqing stared at the action of the person in front of her, ready to counterattack at any time, but suddenly, she seemed to remember something and turned her head away immediately. But it was too late. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. While moving in the air, the boy and the girl looked at each other. The girl's body, which was ready for battle, suddenly stiffened, her arms gently fell to the side of her thighs, her eyes lost their luster, and there was no room for resistance. Zhu Zhuqing and Uranium had been sparring for more than a month. In the past, they always kept an eye on each other's movements. However, at this moment, Zhu Zhuqing had to face the situation that she could not observe the other party's movements, otherwise, if Uranium caught a chance to see her, she would lose. Inertial thinking made her lose the second battle not long after it started. I only used 2/3 of what I just used. Can this also be split by my spirit body? After seeing that Zhu Zhuqing did not make any moves, Uranium frowned. He still underestimated himself. He originally thought that it was enough for him to control this soul master, but he did not expect that only 2/3 could control this soul master, and if he used all his strength, He might not be able to control the Soul Master. But I always feel that it is a bit useless. I can hang up the Soul Master and beat him with my physical body alone. There should be more uses for mental power, but this method can make my methods more diverse. Moreover, this kind of impact of spirit separation may be used on soul beasts. Thinking of this, Uranium's eyes gradually lit up. He had a bold idea. In the Naruto world, Uchiha can catch tailed beasts. Then can he catch soul beasts in Douluo Continent? Chapter 192, The Location of Yin-Yang Eyes of Ice and Fire. This battle itself was not equal. After he used his mental power to participate in the battle, Zhu Xiuqing, who was used to Uranium's fighting style, immediately became a little flustered. It was normal to observe the other party's actions during the battle, but in Uranium's case, it was a self-destructive action. Just look at each other, or even without looking at each other, as long as the other party sees his eyes, the battle is over. After a day, Zhu Xiuqing felt that he had fought until the evening, dizzy, and was about to be dazed. It was not right to look, nor was it right not to look. He felt uncomfortable all over, and his hands and feet were tied. Supporting Zhu Xiuqing, Uranium carefully returned to the place where the wooden house in the camp was located, packed up the pots and other things placed there, and started tonight's dinner and practice. Life in the forest is so boring and monotonous, but because of Zhu Xiuqing's existence, all this is no longer so lonely. But Uranium enjoys all this. If it weren't for the belief of changing the family and becoming stronger that spurred him on, I'm afraid he would have been addicted to the daily life of drinking tea and practicing every day. Although this is the life he longs for, Uranium knows very well that this is not everything for him. Every morning, he is suffering from inner torment. Is Zhu Xiuqing more important, or is the family more important? In the middle of the night, Uranium lay on the hammock, recalling the past in a daze. He had been dawdling in the sunset forest for too long, so long that he didn't even know what he was doing here. If the family is important, then why haven't I started the soul beast destruction operation yet, but stayed by her side every day, practicing every day, and didn't even go to look for the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire in the outside world? In the dim room, there was a rustling sound. Recalling everything he had gone through in his mind, Uranium secretly put on his clothes and climbed out of the window. If Zhu Xiuqing is important, then what is the family? Is it just a verbal statement? The moon was like a silver plate, and the sky was full of stars. Amid the rumbling sound of water, Uranium lay diagonally on the grass, holding a piece of green grass in his mouth, chewing it slightly, letting the faint bitterness spread in his mouth. In the humid air, a fresh breath continued to permeate, and the temperature here was even a few degrees lower than the outside world. The water in the pond nearby was crystal clear, quiet and deep. Under the moonlight, it shone like a huge silver gem. It's not that I have to choose between Zhu Xiuqing and my family. I just want to be sure of one thing. What should I do? Continue to practice with her? No, except for the fact that the Shrek 7 devils combined into one in the Soul Master competition, which made Tang San's short-term Soul Sage state very scary. I don't care about anything else. He raised his white palm to block his eyes, and looked through the gaps between his fingers at the huge silver moon in the sky. Unconsciously, Uranium's eyes were a little blurred. I can't be idle. I have to find the magic herbs, and then improve to Soul King, Soul Emperor, Soul Sage, or even title Douluo as soon as possible, so that I can protect myself. Moreover, things like bloodline may also involve genetic DNA. Douluo Continent can't count on it. I remember there is a Sun-Moon Empire in Douluo II, which specializes in the research of soul guides. Maybe I should go there. I want to go to see. If all else fails, I will take my family to settle in the Sun-Moon Empire. Anyway, Douluo Continent knows about Sharingan, but the Sun-Moon Empire probably doesn't. Sigh. Thinking of everything he had seen in the family, Uranium sighed lightly, withdrew his palms lazily, and rested his head with both hands, his eyes a little dazed. There are many things to do next: ships, sea charts, family, improving strength. I don't have time to play love games here. A low self-murmur suddenly came out of the boy's mouth without any limit. A clear water vapor hid his face, and the moist air was refreshing and extremely comfortable, which could not help but dispel some of the irritability in Uranium's heart. Pooh. Spitting out the grass roots in his mouth, Uranium wiped the slight water stains on his face, not knowing whether it was the soda in the air or the unconscious tears. Sometimes I don't know who I am living for, why I traveled through time and space, and how a soul master should spend his life? I don't want any soul skills, soul bones, soul rings, or soul beasts. He shook his head bitterly, and a low voice kept echoing by the pool, but in the blink of an eye, it was shattered by the rumbling sound of water, and no sound was heard anymore. I just want a peaceful life. The next day, Uranium got up early and began to pack his luggage. Although Zhu Xiuqing got up earlier than Uranium, he was slightly stunned when he saw him acting like this. "What's wrong?" the girl asked indifferently, and suddenly her voice rang in the room. "Put things together. In 3 days, we should set off to the yin-yang eye." Sniffing the faint body fragrance of the girl beside him, Uranium whispered. Perhaps because Uranium felt her gaze, his face straightened and he slowly turned to look at Zhu Xiuqing. During these 3 days, the training of spiritual power soul masters in combat will not be reduced. We will set off after the battle. This camp will be temporarily closed until we go from the yin-yang eye and come back. Uranium's expression did not change, and he said calmly, "I know, Uranium." Just when Uranium had determined the next course of action, Zhu Xiuqing, who was beside him, began to process the ingredients with her slender fingers and nodded without looking away. The indifference of the two people was exactly the same. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Zhu Xiuqing was so smart that she immediately thought of Uranium's behavior and words. I'm afraid that he said it now because he was afraid of affecting his own practice. Indeed, everything taught by the Academy is the best that can be done. Even if Uranium is the most powerful genius, even the 10,000-year soul ring may not be as good as the teachers in the Academy in teaching. So generally speaking, after entering the forest, they practiced and waited for the soul ring, and did not do anything else. But now, Zhu Xiuqing wondered if Uranium felt that the time was right. 3 days passed in a flash. The edge of the pond reflected two shadows, a man and a woman. After locking the cabin and covering everything in the house with a layer of gauze, they walked out directly. The two walked together without saying a word, and stepped out of the water pond camp where they had lived for several months. Uranium, are you sure about the location? Zhu Xiuqing took a last look at the simple wooden house that she had grown attached to, and her expression was a little worried. The boy did not say anything, but nodded slightly. Then, the two of them walked one after the other, with Uranium taking the lead, towards the depths of the forest. Although there were many traps around, in Uranium's perception, it was like a bright road opened up, without any danger. He vaguely remembered that when he was chasing the dark bloodthorn cat, he smelled the hot air. The end of the second update. Chapter 193 Planting the Seeds of Destruction. A few days later, in the early morning, birds were chirping. The weather was clear, and the sun shone through the gaps in the leaves, penetrating the light mist in the forest and sprinkling on the ground. Whoosh! A figure suddenly jumped up from the ground covered with dead leaves, and the dead leaves were flying all over the sky, swaying with the breeze, and slowly falling down. Suddenly, a black shadow, at a very fast speed, broke through the surrounding mist and attacked the figure. The next moment, another figure followed closely behind, pressing forward step by step, with a blurred figure, constantly flickering, and approaching the first beast shadow. The figure suddenly disappeared and then appeared under the beast shadow. A cold light flashed a silver light under the dim light, like a stream of light across the sky. In an instant, a figure appeared behind the beast shadow. On his right hand, a light gray blade appeared at some point. The blade was silver and flashed a silver light. The tip of the blade slowly fluctuated, and not a drop of blood remained on it. Swish! The beast shadow that was charging in the air suddenly stopped for a short while, as if it had lost all its power, and fell rapidly from the air stiffly. A drop of blood fell on a small stone on the ground, making a tiny clear sound. Too slow. The figure whispered, and the light blade dissipated. The next moment, a sound of blood spurting out was heard. The surroundings were silent, only the beast shadow in the air suddenly broke smoothly, accompanied by a snap, and broke into 2 pieces from the waist and fell to the ground. The black shadow was a blue leopard. At this moment, its upper and lower bodies were separated, blood spurted out, and it fell to the ground powerlessly, and its body even twitched unconsciously, with no breath at all. And the figure was a girl, about 1.72 meters tall, wearing a black hooded robe, with some long black hair overflowing from the hood. Her skin was white and smooth, her face was delicate, and her pair of black eyes especially attracted the attention of others, shining like gems. Another young man stood side by side with a girl, Looking at the soul beast corpse on the ground and the slowly rising deep purple soul ring, and the corners of his mouth could not help but rise slightly. The young man had silver hair, fair skin, and a moderate figure. He was slightly taller than the girl. He wore the same black hooded robe. His expression was calm and his spirits were high. The two people in front of him were Uchiha and Uranium. A few days ago, the two came here to chase a fast-escaping 10,000-year soul beast, the purple thunderlight shadow leopard. After a fierce battle, Uranium asked Uchiha to wait first, and then he chased the 10,000-year guy alone. During the period, he encountered a poisonous dust python and a black female golden monkey. There is no doubt that these are good carriers of radiation energy. He even deliberately corrupted a piece of land, preparing to use this as a base point to create a scene like the one in the Dou Great Forest. Later, when Uranium came back, he found that Uchiha had already fought with a swift wind blue leopard, so this incident took place. How is it? Are you familiar with shadow warping? Looking at the fallen blue panther with a purple halo floating on its body, Uranium whispered. Then he walked towards the body of the blue panther. Well, I can draw my sword the moment I warp out, and warp to another place again before the blade of light dissipates. Under the slowly falling leaves, Uchiha smiled and gathered her clothes. She was elegant and calm, and nodded to Uranium. It just so happens that our food is almost finished. I'll take you as my food storage for the time being. More than an hour later, Uchiha and Uranium sat on a stone, holding a roasted and fragrant barbecue in their hands, and began to enjoy it in small bites. After eating, the two dealt with the scene, then jumped onto a big tree, found a thick branch, lay down lazily, squinted their eyes, and began to rest. The breeze blew, and the branches and leaves on the tree made a rustling sound. Uchiha's clothes and hair also swayed gently. She looked comfortable and enjoyed it very much. Uranium, I feel that the temperature nearby is getting a little high. Is it close to the yin-yang eye of ice and fire you mentioned? The breeze blew, and a faint smell of sulfur came from the air. Although it was not obvious, it made Uchiha feel something. Well, let's look around today. There is a 10,000-year soul beast area nearby. I remember that the yin-yang eye of ice and fire is in the center of the sunset forest. Be careful. Looking at Uchiha's serious little face, Uranium hesitated for a moment, touched his chin and nodded. At present, he was not very sure that he could get the opportunity of yin-yang eye of ice and fire, so he was quite hesitant about the center of the sunset forest that was getting closer and closer. There are many difficulties. First, how to enter the poison array. Second, how to resist the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. The yin-yang eyes of ice and fire not only nourish immortal herbs, but also have extremely special effects on the human body. Once humans or animals live next to the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire, their bodies will be impacted by the two extreme attributes of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in a short period of time. If they cannot leave in time, they will definitely explode and die. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Third, how to identify immortal herbs. Fourth, how to take the immortal herbs and take them. Fifth, how to confirm that the immortal herbs you get are suitable for you. So this is where Uranium hesitated. According to the description of Tang San's original work, some immortal herbs need to be taken with the gold and jade, and some need to be touched by specific things, otherwise, even if they do not wither immediately, the medicinal effect will be greatly reduced. Moreover, half of the plants in the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire are highly poisonous. Even the immortal herbs such as the 8-angled mysterious ice grass and the fiery apricot, which Tang San used to cheat, are only of medium quality in the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire, not to mention the other immortal herbs. Therefore, Uranium must be extremely cautious in the next trip, otherwise there is a risk of death. He did not dare to use the radiation field in the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire, because radiation also has the same effect on plants. Once the immortal herbs are destroyed, causing him and Uchiha to come here in vain, then all preparations will be in vain. I remember that the eye of elements can see the flow of energy. Logically, immortal herbs that are rich in energy can also be considered soul beasts. I remember that there was a 100,000-year-old 8-angled mysterious ice grass soul beast in Douluo. Maybe I can use the eye of elements to find its weakness, otherwise there is really no way. Looking at Uchiha's figure with his eyes closed, Uranium continued to think about his own plan. Not only did he have to make sure Douluo was no longer in Sunset Forest, otherwise he would have to face the wrath of the tidal Douluo, but also the fragrant yellow immortal product and the heartbroken acacia red. Was it necessary for him to touch them? Uranium could clearly feel that there was a special flavor between him and Zhu Xiuqing, and he was sure of it. He liked Zhu Xiuqing. Forget it, I can't touch the heartbroken acacia red. It was Xiao Wu's way of restraining her 100,000-year soul beast aura. I absolutely can't let her make a mistake. After a long time, Uranium leaned against the tree and shook his head secretly. It was just an immortal grass. Chapter 194 Yin Yang Eyes of Ice and Fire. One day later. This is a dense forest, and in front of Zhu Xiuqing and you is a hill about 500 meters high in the forest. The two are still 2 or 3 kilometers away from the hill, but they can already see the top of the hill, with steam rising up and rushing into the sky. The yin-yang eye of ice and fire is located in the center of the sunset forest. The distance from any direction to there is almost equal. Zhu Xiuqing and you followed the smell of sulfur, and it took less than a day for them to reach the outer circle of the poison array set up by Douluo. This whole mountain is the forbidden fruit of the green phosphorus Douluo. If he is discovered stealing the fairy grass, I am afraid he will have to fight to the death. The most urgent task is not only to detect Douluo's movements, but also how to bring Zhu Xiuqing in intact. After all, he doesn't know what to use to get it or what to put it in. It is better to find the fairy grass first, then bring Zhu Xiuqing in, pick it and eat it directly, and leave after eating, never stay. Anyway, there are so many immortal herbs here, it is not a big problem to lose a few plants. Oh, yes, there are also many cordyceps sinensis and Ganoderma lucidum herbs that grow amazingly. You can take some of them. Suddenly, Uranium remembered something. After all, in the eyes of Binghuo Liangayan, it is not only the immortal herbs that are valuable. The other tonics are enough to shock the world. They can regulate qi and blood and nourish the internal organs. They are all good. Moreover, Zhu Xiuqing and he are both at the age of laying the foundation, which is more suitable for such medicine to assist and consolidate the foundation. Uranium, we are here, so let's. Zhu Xiuqing slowly took off the hood on her head, revealing her black hair, with a solemn look in her eyes. She could feel that the mountain was full of the smell of the poisonous array, which was very pungent and obvious. Obviously, this was the poison array used by Douluo to drive away other 10,000-year soul beasts. With her level of 30-level soul master, she would probably turn into corpse water and die miserably soon after entering. Don't worry, let me see. This is the hometown of the green phosphorus Douluo. I need to make sure if he is here first. As he spoke, Uranium quietly opened the radiation eye martial spirit. The eye of elements, open. In an instant, the black and white colors completely changed Uranium's vision. All he saw were black and white dead things, without a trace of life and energy flow. But the next moment, everything he saw shocked Uranium, who was ready to investigate the situation. Colorful, and various light spots instantly lit up all of Uranium's sight. Such a dazzling light almost forced Uranium to close the Eye of Elements directly at the moment it appeared. Fuck. The Eye of Elements was forced to close in less than a second after it was opened. This extremely disgusting light spot dizziness almost made him feel like vomiting on the spot. There were too many light spots and energy flow lines inside. What's wrong? Zhu Xiuqing, who was observing the surroundings, immediately moved her eyes over, looking nervous and worried. After taking a few deep breaths, Uranium slowly calmed down the depressed mood in his chest. Then, he clapped his hands, lay on the ground, covered his face with his hands, and rubbed it gently. The experience just now was too scary. Just a second ago, he was full of confidence and wanted to open the Eye of Elements to observe where Douluo was, but what caught his eyes was the energy fluctuations of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire and all the energy-rich, fairy-grade herbs around it, as well as other top-grade herbs that were not counted as fairy herbs. It can be said that the energy fluctuations of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire alone almost blinded him. If there is a next time, he will never dare to look at it like this, even if he wants to die. But the good news is that he saw where Douluo is. We stayed in the forest for more than 3 months. According to the original historical trajectory, it was probably around this time that Douluo was looking for trouble with Shrek Academy for Prince Zuxing. Although it was just a glance, I didn't feel Tang San's energy fluctuations. Uranium began to carefully recall the timeline of the original work. Although he read it in a hurry, the energy fluctuations that belonged to Tang San were engraved in his heart. After all, he was the protagonist of Douluo Continent. Even if he didn't have any intersection with him in the future, he had to do something just in case. He clearly remembered that after Tang-san came to the yin-yang eye of ice and fire, he would practice here for more than half a year, and he would also sweep the medicinal materials here when he left. The current situation would definitely not exist. Damn it, when Douluo goes to find trouble with Shrek, it will be time for Douluo to capture Tang-san. There is not much time left for me to test the 5 problems before. I only have half a day to drive Shrek away in the morning and capture Tang-san at night. How can I get the right fairy grass? He punched the ground angrily, and Uranium's face was full of entanglement. We have to take some risks. Uranium's face showed a resolute look. The immortal grass was related to Zhu Zhuking's talent, as well as his own soul power and background. He had to act immediately. The green phosphorus poison was useless to him. At best, it was a biological toxin composed of protein. It had no effect on people like him who had awakened the radiation field. In his previous college life, he had fought with the vice captain Yanzi using the green phosphorus poison inherited from Douluo. Maybe we can let Yanzi hold Douluo back for a while. Suddenly, Uranium thought of this idea. But then, he shook his head. It's too late. Even if Zhu Zhuking leaves the Sunset Forest now and goes to Shandao Royal Academy to find Yanzi, it will take at least 3 days, not to mention that Douluo values Tang-san, who has broken Yanzi's green phosphorus poison. Tang-san, Douluo is sure to catch him. And once Zhu Zhuking leaves, who'll eat the immortal grass? Seeing Uranium constantly talking to himself, his voice muttering, although he couldn't hear clearly, Zhu Zhuking's heart couldn't help but tighten. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shoe Bar. What happened? Zhu Zhuking couldn't help asking when she saw the uncertain look on Uranium's face. Nothing, I'm going to act now. His poison array should be useless to me. I'm going to sneak in and see what's inside the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. You should stay away from here and go to the number 2 camp we prepared before. Uranium shook his head, indicating that Zhu Zhuking's worry was unnecessary. Not only was he not going to wait for the opportunity, but he chose to take the initiative. Zhu Zhuking didn't understand that for Uranium, time was not waiting for anyone. Tang-san would be here at any time, and then Douluo would be waiting all the time. He didn't think that relying on a slightly better relationship with Yanzi would make Douluo give in and take out the immortal grass. That old poisonous creature would only compromise with his relatives and important people. Was Uranium important to him? Time is running out, we must act quickly. After investigating everything, we will wait for the short half-day time difference when Douluo leaves, so that Zhu Zhuking can absorb the immortal grass and then reorganize and leave. So Uranium is ready to take risks alone, and let Zhu Zhuking hide far away. If she is discovered, it will be a big deal. Time, recommend a friend's book. Douluo's auxiliary upgrade system. The following is a brief introduction. Traveling through the Douluo world, at the beginning of the plot, Lin Feng awakens the auxiliary upgrade system. As long as you do things that can enhance your own strength, you can gain experience points. Even running and sleeping can increase experience points. Ling. I had a nightmare when I was asleep. I dreamed that I became a personal soul master who had practiced for 2.5 years. My mental power increased slightly, and my experience points were plus 100, Ling. After a period of hard practice, the host mastered the basic axe method, and the experience points were plus 100. Looking at the increasing experience points, Lin Feng knew that he would create his own myth on the Douluo Continent. After looking at other Douluo fanfictions, I couldn't help but shed tears of regret. I felt strange. Why is it so difficult for me to write a fanfiction? I finally figured out why other Douluo stories are so easy to write. It turns out that there are 7 people in the group flow, plus the master, the protagonist, Flanders, Zhao Wuji, more than 10 people, and they can write a chapter with just a casual dialogue. There is no progress in the plot. The people who rate it are dumbfounded. I also want to learn how to increase the word count, but I looked at the protagonist and the cat, so I gave up this idea. So, since I don't increase the word count, I can only advance the plot. I am still envious, but I also understand that no readers are willing to read this kind of watered-down word count, and no one will subscribe. Just looking at the catalog can infer the direction of the future, and there is no need to read the text at all, so the above is all bullshit. Everyone just treat it as a joke. I have my own plot, don't worry about subscribing, and I am very happy. 10 more chapters will be updated tomorrow. I will do what I say and start coding immediately. The progress of the plot needs to be slightly accelerated. Calculating the time, Tang-san will be here soon. Chapter 195 Official Infiltration. Dusk fell. In Camp Number 2, Uranium and Zhu Zhuking opened up the moderately sized site and set up traps around it for temporary use. The breeze blew, lifting a wisp of dry white leaves, which kept drifting away. The surrounding environment was different from the outside world, where you could encounter soul beasts after walking a few steps. This was the center of the Sunset Forest, and it seemed extremely deserted, and you couldn't encounter a soul beast. The two ate dinner in small bites. Zhu Zhuking was preparing for soul power training, while Uranium was preparing for infiltration. It was easy to go up the mountain, but there were a few more troublesome points to deal with. The poison array should have been made by Douluo himself, so would his infiltration alert the other party? After entering the mountain, you must keep the elemental pupils throughout the whole process to ensure that you will not bump into Douluo while walking. And finally, how to deal with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth rich in the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire? Although he can use the energy absorption aura to ensure that he will not make mistakes, he dare not use soul skills in the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire, otherwise it will be very troublesome if he is detected. In other words, his activity time depends on the time that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire erodes his body. He must be able to withdraw after entering and use the energy absorption aura to purify the energy in his body. Only in this way can he have enough time to keep trying. He already has an idea. Maybe he can use the Eye of Elements to observe the energy flow to determine where the weakest point of the fairy grass is, and then try it out and pick it off. But I may not be able to bear the risk of touching it directly. Uranium remembered those clips of Tang-san picking the fairy grass, and his face was quite solemn. The crackling bonfire kept burning. The sporadic orange-yellow flames kept splashing from the fire, forming a rather strange contrast with the silent surroundings. Okay, I'm off. After a moment, Uranium slowly stood up, tightened his clothes, and walked towards the hills in the distance that were faintly flashing red light. Be careful. Suddenly, a voice from behind froze Uranium's movements. But the next moment, Uranium immediately waved his hand back and said, "Don't worry, I'm walking between the mountains." There was a constant crisp sound of crushed leaves. The boy's movements were neither slow nor slow, without any of the nervousness and hesitation he had just felt when thinking about the problem in the camp. The first goal is to find the Narcissus Jade Muscle Bone. This is what Zhu Zhuking has eaten. I remember Tang-san ate 3 kinds of fairy grass. With Zhu Zhuking's current soul bone state, she may be able to eat 1 more. I have to look carefully to see if there is anything that can improve the quality of the martial spirit. Here we are. Looking at the hill about 500 meters high in the forest in front of him, Uranium's mentality became calmer. Because it was night, he could not see too much scenery outside. Douluo, where are you? Resisting the discomfort of what was about to happen, in the dark night, a pair of black and yellow eyes emitted bright light, like a demon choosing people to devour, shining with luster, and constantly flowing with a faint rhyme. Everything in front of him was in full view. The supervision brought by the 3 Megadamus and the elemental pupils that penetrated objects allowed Uranium to instantly capture the other side of the mountain, which was similar to a high-energy humanoid creature in a cave. There was no doubt that it was Douluo. Only the energy fluctuations of the tidal Douluo could have such a huge deterrent aura. Uranium traveled several kilometers and used the Eye of Elements to observe. It only took a glance and then closed it immediately. It did not stop or observe deliberately. It just swept past without putting its own consciousness, thoughts, killing intentions, and other things into it. Tidal Douluo is not trash. He is the top existence in Douluo Continent. Although Douluo is the weakest tidal Douluo, I can't observe him recklessly. He might sense my existence and come out to kill me. After taking a look, Uranium closed the Eye of Elements directly, looking solemn. Jumping left and right under the eyes of Bilan Douluo, this kind of excitement is too strong, isn't it? The battle begins. A slight hum came from the dark forest. The next moment, the dense vegetation around it trembled slightly, and then there was no sound at all. On the hill, under a huge rock, there was a crowd of people. The latest novel is published on the 69th Book Forum. The blue-purple stench continued to spread, with terrifying soul fluctuations that could kill anyone who touched it, all around, underneath, and in the air. A layer of purple air emerged from the ground and slowly rose in the air, but the next moment, it seemed to be out of control and directly sank into Uranium's body. In an instant, It completely dissipated. If Douluo saw this scene, his face would definitely change drastically. This layer of purple air is the most basic existence of this poison formation. Around this mountain, there are poison formations set up by Douluo. Anyone who enters will be infected by the poison. This poison is not very strong, but it is very poisonous. It takes an hour for it to break out. After an hour, the poison person will twitch all over, and his meridians will atrophy and die. At present, with the neutralization and absorption of the radiation field in uranium's body, this protein toxin, or gas toxin, has become a harmless product without any danger. He does not need to force the toxin out, but the toxin that penetrates into his body will be continuously transformed, eventually overflowing and completely annihilated. It seems that my guess is right. Sure enough, the green phosphorus poison has no effect on me. Whether it is Yanzi at the level of Soul Master or Douluo at the level of Title Douluo, if it were other things, I might not dare to come in, but toxins, haha, how could they be useful to me? Looking at the current situation, Uranium raised a mocking smile. The radiation field is the process in which the nucleus of a heavy atom splits into 2 or more lighter nuclei, and 2 to 3 free neutrons are released during the splitting, and huge energy is released. The energy contained in it, as well as the mass of the atoms that smash the protein, have made him ignore any toxins. But whether the radiation field can resist the erosion of the soul power and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth brought by the fairy grass is still unknown. Phase 1, completed. Walking into the hill, Uranium climbed up the mountain road as if walking on flat ground, with light hands and feet. Everything in the dark night was as bright as day, so he tried his best not to trigger any falling gravel or making crisp sounds, which would easily alert Douluo. In addition, his own movements were extremely fast. He seemed to walk very slowly, but every step he took was carefully calculated, and the distance of each step was extremely uniform. The whole person was like a vertical ascent during the climbing process. Almost every time he walked a certain distance, Uranium would open the eye of elements and lightly scan Douluo's location before determining whether to continue moving forward. He did not intend to stare at Douluo, because doing so might make him feel peeped. After a while, Uranium came to the top of the mountain like a ghost. When he got here, Uranium could not help but be startled by the terrain in front of him. There was actually an inverted cone-shaped valley in front of him. The top of the mountain where he was the edge of the valley. Thick hot air rose from the valley. The hot air was very humid and had a bit of the unique smell of sulfur. Ice and fire, yin and yang eyes, I found you. Chapter 196. Then, let's start the experiment. Looking at everything in front of him, Uranium's expression became more serious. What follows is the official start. The inverted cone-shaped mountain valley, the dark bottom of the mountain, the thick fog at night, and the steep cliffs directly formed this scene that looked like a cliff. How can I get down? He didn't have Tang San's 8 spider lances to let him crawl down like a spider, nor did he have Douluo's strong soul power to protect his body without considering how high it was and jump directly, and he couldn't make any sound when he moved. All of this seemed to restrict Uranium's thoughts. After just a few minutes of thinking, the young man standing on the edge of the mountain pass made a prompt decision and no longer hesitated. Climb. After determining the course of action, Uranium immediately began to observe the surrounding terrain through his eyes that could see through the thick fog and darkness, to see if there was a way to climb this 400 or 500 meter high mountain valley. This depth completely exceeded the height of a 100-story skyscraper. Once he fell down, he would probably turn into a pool of meat paste, and there would be no way to survive. If I had Zhu Zhuking's soul bone skill, Shadow Warp, I would be able to safely fall to the bottom of the mountain in less than a minute by constantly warping. The darkness is Zhu Zhuking's natural battlefield. I envy her so much. Before leaving, Uranium's mind flashed with Zhu Zhuking's cold and worried face. Not long after, Uranium followed his thoughts, looking at the undulating cliffs, the protruding rocks and vegetation, and a route gradually took shape in his mind. A quarter of an hour later, under Uranium's eyes, a safe road had successfully fallen to the bottom and landed safely. Found it as soon as the voice fell, Uranium no longer hesitated, decisively tightened his wrist, took a step forward, looked at the dark bottom of the mountain, and the protruding rocks in his sight. Uranium pulled the thick rope wrapped around his waist, tested the rope to see if there was any problem, and then lightly touched the cliff with his toes, and then fell directly to the bottom of the dark cliff. The fierce wind blew the clothes tightly against the surface of the skin. Uranium's left hand was empty, and the rope on his right hand that had been rotating for several times was suddenly pulled. The rapidly falling figure was slowly suspended in the middle of the cliff. With a long breath, Uranium began to shake himself slightly. There was emptiness under his feet, and only countless darkness continued to emerge, as if it was a bottomless abyss. Suppressing this trembling psychology of heights, Uranium knew very well that this was the fear of heights in human genes, because it meant that in this environment, death was inevitable. Uranium began to swing his body. The tough thick rope was strong enough and did not show signs of wear and tear due to Uranium's actions. When Uranium's toes kicked against the mountain wall and his body swung violently again, his empty left hand swung violently and firmly grasped the huge protruding rock. The force was so strong that a 5-finger mark was deeply carved on the stone. With his sole power, let alone grabbing through the stone, even tearing the stone apart like a chicken with hands could be easily done. He is a soul master, and a soul master of the soul sect level. The next moment, with his palm like a knife, Uranium immediately cut the rope wrapped around his waist and put all his weight on his left hand. Without the restraint of the rope, Uranium, who had the physical fitness of the Soul Emperor level under the amplification of 3 Megatama, immediately showed his body coordination and flexibility. He grabbed the rock with his left hand and climbed up with his right hand. The whole person landed on the rock as if he had taken off into the air. Turning his head, Uranium's eyes stayed on the next landing point. A protruding huge tree root. With extremely good physical fitness, Uranium kept jumping and leaping between the cliffs, as if drawing an arc-shaped route, turning smoothly on the cliffs without any sense of awkwardness. Uranium's toes kept tapping on the mountain wall, and with the help of the speed of jumping, the distance between Uranium and the ground at the bottom was gradually shortened. Next to the campfire, the girl set up a tent, casually swept the fallen leaves around, and then got in, ready to start practicing. There are a lot of traps set up by Uranium around. It is very safe under normal circumstances. Zhu Huking also understands this, so she feels very relieved in this safe area. The tent is the one that Uranium and Zhu Huking once slept in together. Uranium, there are 2 beds inside the tent. The girl stuck her head out of the quilt and looked at the bed beside her absent-mindedly. A quarter of an hour later, bang, a figure jumped down from the mountain after removing the potential energy, and rolled a few times, making a slight sound. The second stage is completed. With his legs bent, Uranium gently dusted off the dust on his body and turned his eyes to the scene in the valley in front of him. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. What surprised him was that the hot spring in the valley in front of him was not what he imagined. The area of the hot spring was not large, but it was divided into 2 parts. The colors of the hot spring water in the oval pool were milky white and vermilion respectively. What is even more bizarre is that although they are in the same pool, they are clearly separated, do not invade each other, and always stay on their own side. Is this the yin-yang eye of ice and fire? The steam that rolled up was generated by the position between the 2 hot springs, rising continuously until it slowly dissipated at the mountain pass. Uranium looked at the magnificent scenery in front of him absent-mindedly. The darkness was as bright as day in front of him, and that was why he could see everything clearly. See where Douluo is. As soon as he landed, Uranium felt a slight cold and hot air circling nearby. Although this was not the place where the real spiritual energy of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire conflicted, it was almost the same. But since he had reached his destination, Uranium opened the eye of elements. His eyes were not on the yin-yang eye of ice and fire in front of him, but on the location of Douluo that he had seen before. He had learned a lesson before. The energy of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire was beyond his imagination, not to mention the numerous fairy grasses that were as numerous as the stars in the sky. If he used the eye of elements to see, he would not be able to bear it. The eye of elements was opened. Uranium quickly glanced in the direction of Douluo, and then quickly closed it. The whole process took no more than a second. It came quickly and went away quickly. Sure enough, it's still there. Since Douluo didn't come out, let's start the 3rd stage. Uranium tidied up his body and set his sights on the valley in front of him. Then, without hesitation, he moved towards the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. Without Douluo, Uranium no longer had to suppress the excitement in his heart. He quickly walked to the side of the fiery red-hot spring water in the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. The strange thing was that there was no temperature on the surface of this calm hot spring water. Is this the place where Tang Sam cheated? Sure enough, the energy here is beyond my imagination. Uranium would certainly not be deceived by this appearance. In the original book, it is introduced that this seemingly calm red liquid is hot enough to be compared with magma. If you touch it out of curiosity, then wherever you touch it, it will be burned and disappear. Then, let's start the experiment. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 197: The True Power of the Eye of Elements. He focused his power in his eyes, and activated the pupils of elements. Different colored energy condensed in his eyes. Under the full power of his pupils, everything in front of him became extremely clear. Although the surroundings were hazy with mist, with the help of the light of the stars and the moon in the sky, he could still see everything around him clearly. Around the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire, there were all kinds of plants in various shapes and forms. It looked like a paradise for plants. However, the plants here were all rare. Just a glance at them made him stunned. He knew that there were a lot of good things inside, and he had confirmed this before, but now that he saw it for the first time, he still had an indescribable sense of fluctuation in his heart. However, this surprise was only for a moment. Uranium reacted immediately, his expression calm, and walked towards a strange-shaped herb at the outermost edge. The moonlight quietly poured down on the hairless plant, with a thick stem and as high as Uranium's calf. The leaves grew from the stem and were divided into different compound leaves. The sepals were white, and the outermost layer was purple. They were white and oval, like a flower about to bloom. The leaves were not big, but there was a fragrance around them, which made people feel refreshed. What is this? It's a bit like chrysanthemum, and also a bit like the tangerine grass at home. Uranium frowned slightly, and his mind turned and began to analyze. That's right, although he didn't have the Zuanshan Baolu like Tang Sen, which recorded the appearance and use of the immortal grass, he could experiment by himself. Anyway, if he ran away, Douluo wouldn't be able to find the culprit. Start experimenting with the Eye of Elements. Under the moonlight, the corners of the boy's mouth raised an arc, and his eyes showed an indescribable color. The unknown herb in front of him began to condense the fluid fluctuations of energy under his eyes. Cyan. Several tiny and undetectable cyan lines flowed slowly in the plant in front of him. Uranium's elemental eye did not look at other herbs, but only stared at this one, so naturally he did not feel the embarrassment of being almost harmed by his pupil technique. What appeared in front of Uranium's eyes was the herb that was completely made up of thin lines of cyan energy. The world in front of him was completely an energy world. The ground was emitting a glittering white light, and the air was filled with red and blue colors. That was the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire that spontaneously overflowed here. Ordinary plants could not grow here at all, because ordinary plants could not adapt to the special climate, but the yin-yang eye of ice and fire was the place where all precious plants were derived. Moreover, the existence of the spiritual energy of the heaven and earth around would shorten the growth time of these rare plants by 10 times. In simple terms, if a Ganoderma lucidum grows in the yin-yang eye of ice and fire for 10 years, it will have the effect of a 100-year-old Ganoderma lucidum. It was these energies that promoted the birth of the immortal grass. Haha, it's worthy of being the Eye of Elements. Through the so-called appearance, I can see through its true core. The essence of the fairy grass is also energy. It is the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, which is different from the radiation I control. Looking at everything in front of him through his eyes, Uranium's expression somehow became a little ferocious. This is a new power. This is the power to change the essence of the martial soul, just like Ma Hongjian's evil fire phoenix evolved into a real phoenix, and the 7 treasures glazed tower evolved into the 9 treasures glazed tower. It completely overrides the power system of soul power. Maybe the defects of the Sharingan can be solved here. Suddenly, Uranium remembered something, and his ferocious expression suddenly collapsed. No, I remember that in Douluo, Ma Hongjian's descendants were also evil fire phoenixes, not real phoenixes. At most, only individual Sharingans were perfected, not the whole family. His face slowly returned to peaceful posture. Uranium no longer considered whether the fairy grass could purify the family bloodline. It was meaningless. Let's not talk about not knowing which immortal grass can purify the blood, the unknown method of carrying, the unknown family position, the unknown method of taking, the unknown unknown, all unknown. It's better to consider the present and make plans for Zhu Zhuking and myself. At this time, Uranium has begun to close his eyes to feel how to use his elemental pupil to pick this herb. After seeing this situation with his eyes, Uranium has become a little clear-headed. The original work said that Tang San's gold to take the jade suit must be cut with gold and iron. This is pure nonsense. Why is there such a word? It's nothing more than the adaptability of energy. Once the existence of metal jade such as jade, gold, silver, and iron touches the body of the immortal grass, the essence of jade is a fibrous aggregate of various masses. The iron component is iron atoms, that is, the solidified state of atomic-level iron particles continuously accumulated. And gold, silver, etc. are all like this. The reason why the immortal grass will enter the energy overflow state once it is picked up by mistake is because the corresponding atoms are used incorrectly to contact the immortal grass, resulting in the neutralization of the energy components and the complete loss of the true power of the immortal product. Uranium guessed this way. After all, steel is the same as iron, and is also composed of iron atoms, impurity elements, carbon, etc., but it is very different from iron, and its toughness and strength are very different. The more precious the herb, the higher the storage requirements. Some need to be packed with gold and jade, and some need to be packed with silver and iron. If there is a slight mistake, the efficacy will be greatly reduced, and the herb will wither immediately. This can also explain why the immortal herb needs specific things to be picked up and preserved, otherwise there will be the consequence of energy dissipation. Tang San in the original work naturally would not understand these deepest truths. After all, there is a path like Zhuanshan Baolu, and he will not study it in depth, but uranium is different. He has a radiation field and an elemental eye, and can see what the innermost essence is. The latest novel is first published on the 6th-9th book bar. And after understanding the essence, Uranium naturally knows what to do next. The third stage is completed. Uranium directly stretched out his hand, looked at this natural treasure, and slowly reached towards it. Unconsciously, a layer of invisible light gray energy particles had already appeared on his right hand. The only difference from Zhu Zhuking is that it is a product of the radiation field. Its most important ability is the conflict between individual flesh and energy. The reason why uranium can use nuclear explosion kicks without hurting itself is also due to the high-energy particle flow protection. At present, this high-energy particle flow protection has become a pair of gloves, ensuring that uranium will not touch it personally. Radiation is energy. With a faint whisper, Uranium slowly lowered his body and immediately grasped the places in his eyes where the green energy gathered the least. It was smooth to the touch, as if touching jelly, and his fingers instantly showed signs of slipping away. There was no sense of rawness at all, nor the texture of holding a plant. It's not a fairy product. The energy fluctuation level is not high enough. It looks like a herb of heavenly treasure level. After holding the fairy herb for only a few breaths, Uranium loosened its grip and let go of the plant it had just caught. Uranium slowly raised its head and looked at all the herbs around it, and began to carefully feel the difference between them. Suddenly, Uranium seemed to have some sense and immediately looked at his palm. His palm was faintly blue and red. Chapter 198 Yu Hong Shinrenju. There was silence around the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. The moonlight gently sprinkled down, penetrating the gray haze of the fog. The faint silver light fell into the yin-yang eye of ice and fire in the deep valley, illuminating Uranium's face. Letting go of this heavenly material and earthly treasure, Uranium moved his eyes to other plants. There are too many good things. Looking at the countless treasures in front of him, Uranium couldn't help but whispered. In addition to the immortal products that require specific things to store and take, other heavenly materials and earthly treasures do not have such restrictions. As long as you take them, you can take them. In other words, everything in front of you can be packed and taken away. But for now, the most important thing to Uranium is the existence of the immortal grass. Let me recall, where's the immortal grass that Zhu Zhuking ate? The Narcissus jade muscle bone. Uranium stood up and began to rotate around the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. Narcissus jade muscle bone is a known immortal grass that Zhu Zhuking ate without any conflict, and the method of taking it is also written in the original book. Apart from carrying it, this is the easiest immortal grass he can obtain. White, radiant flowers and herbs, look spotless like a white lotus, have the function of nourishing the muscles and bones, and can circulate qi through the 7 meridians and 8 vessels. I took a look. Why are there so many herbs that meet the appearance requirements? Uranium quickly circled around the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. With just a rough observation, he saw 7 or 8 herbs that met the appearance requirements, and he was stunned. Taking a deep breath, Uranium decisively opened the elemental pupil, and endured the dazzling energy fluid fluctuations around him, and began to distinguish the energy values of these herbs. The reason why fairy grass is not only because of its unique special effects, but more importantly, the energy the fairy grass can store is the top priority. The more energy stored, the more soul power level it can increase. The effect of each fairy herb is to increase the soul power by about 10 levels, but a part of it is mainly manifested in the transformation of itself, and the increase in soul power will naturally weaken it. The difference between the top-grade fairy grass and ordinary fairy grass lies in the energy level difference in transformation and soul power enhancement. After looking around, Uranium put his eyes on the center of a bunch of herbs. The white herbs were like stars surrounding the moon. They were not very tall, but they had a crystal clear and straightforward feeling. From his angle, he even had the illusion of seeing himself. "I found you. Narcissus jade muscle and bone." Suddenly, as he slowly approached, a large flower more than 3 feet tall came into view. For no reason, a word emerged in Uranium's mind. Superb fairy grass. Its whole plant was covered with soft hairs, and the leaves were alternate and petal-shaped. The outer circle was a round of golden and fragmented edges, and the inside suddenly deepened to purple. The deeper it went, the darker the color was, until a red round bud in the center. Just seeing this, Uranium's expression was a little dazed, and he didn't even notice the swelling and pain in his hand. What a beautiful flower! This was Uranium's first feeling. The next moment, Uranium woke up suddenly, his expression full of solemnity. He knew clearly that he had been attracted. Under the moonlight, the yellow-purple flower swayed gently, as if dancing in the wind. "This is a fairy grass, and it may be very suitable for me." Uranium slowly walked to this flower that looked like a chrysanthemum, but not like a chrysanthemum, and stared at the energy contained in this fairy grass. In his field of vision, various colors of energy continued to gather, and the red and blue colors in the air were especially abundant, all immersed in it, as if materialized. "Let me see what your structure is and what direction you are improving in." This fairy grass absorbed so much energy from the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire. I'm afraid that the energy level fluctuations in it have reached the level of the top matching fairy grass, and the direction of improvement contained in it is the focus of Uranium's concern. He must get the longing for the autumn water dew, which can improve the soul power of his eyes, and his martial soul is the radiation eye. The eye martial soul and the fairy grass that improves the eyes may even be the best match. See the essence through the phenomenon. Uranium wants to figure out how to pick this plant that suits him and how to take it, so as to pave the way for taking it in the next period of time after Douluo goes out. In the body of this fairy grass, there are 4 different energies constantly running, 3 more than the natural treasure he just saw. 1 red and 1 blue, they are the 2 colors of energy at the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire, which is also the key to improving the quality of the fairy grass. 1 yellow and 1 purple, almost surprisingly consistent with the 2 colors on its surface, as if does the energy in the body reflect the color of the surface? Or does this change happen by chance? Muttering, Uranium began to observe carefully again, stroking the petals with one hand, and a sharp edge immediately cut a fine mark on Uranium's palm. Hiss. The mark was not deep, but very shallow, as if it was just a scratch on the stratum corneum, and there was no pain. But what surprised Uranium was not the pain, but the inexplicable worry. The latest novels are published on the 69th book bar. I just touched it and it cut my hand. If I eat the petals, I'm afraid my stomach will be perforated. The young man squatted down slowly and continued to observe the continuous evolution of the energy contained in it with interest. In his vision, the red and blue colors from the outside world were constantly absorbed by the yellow and purple energy, and the energy from the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire continued to flow in like an endless stream, which is why there are 4 colors in front of him. But if the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire are lost, I'm afraid this fairy grass will only have 2 energy colors. How to absorb it is a problem facing Uranium. After all, he doesn't have the Zhuanshan treasure record like Tang San to record the method of consumption. During the observation, Uranium suddenly found an interesting point. The 2 energies of yellow and purple are not intertwined, but are straight and clear, each passing through its own. Its stem is purple. Most of a petal is purple. Only the outermost layer is yellow. Could it be that the energy in this fairy grass will also erode each other? The purple energy erodes and converts into yellow energy. Perhaps the existence of this energy is the key to my swallowing of the fairy grass and absorbing the medicinal power. Looking at the fluctuations in front of him, Uranium's eyes lit up. Thinking of this, Uranium immediately stood up and prepared to go and see the fairy grass that Zhu King had chosen, Narcissus Jade Muscle Bone. But before he could take a few steps forward, suddenly, a sharp pain like a needle piercing his whole body suddenly came. Ugh! With a muffled groan, Uranium immediately realized that he had stayed here for too long. Without hesitation, he endured the pain of his whole body swelling and being invaded by the energy of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire, and Uranium ran directly to the outside world. As soon as he moved, beads of sweat came out, and fine sweat covered his forehead. This level of pain was because he had stayed by the pool for too long, so that his whole body was filled with this kind of spiritual energy of heaven and earth. If he wanted to dissolve it, it would probably take some time to absorb these energies with the energy absorption halo. Just as he left the center of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire and came out of the valley, Uranium stopped and looked at his hands in astonishment. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was actually absorbed by his body spontaneously. Chapter 199 Preparation. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth has been absorbed. Such a scene made Uranium a little stunned, and for a moment he didn't know what happened. What's going on? Isn't it said that if you stay at the yin-yang eye of ice and fire for a short period of time, your body will be impacted by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth with two extreme properties? If you can't leave in time, you will definitely explode and die. Uranium looked at his body without any inconvenience, and murmured. The next moment, Uranium slapped his forehead and suddenly remembered. Yes, my body has been transformed by the 3 megatom radiation eyes. The radiation field is in my body. Even if I don't use it, it still maintains and has not disappeared. In other words, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth has indeed been absorbed by my body, just like the fairy grass absorbs the energy contained in the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. And the reason why I can't hold on is probably that the absorption threshold has reached a certain limit. Maybe this is also due to the passive energy absorption halo. Guessing this, Uranium's expression was quite excited, so much so that his voice couldn't help but get a little louder. Suddenly, Uranium frowned, and a bulging, full texture like eating a full stomach came out of his chest. Unable to hold it back, Uranium burped immediately. Visible to the naked eye, red and blue, 2 colors of breath suddenly emerged from his mouth, forming a 2-color intertwined circular gas in the air, and then dissipated into nothingness, as if it were the last residue and completely disappeared. This everything he saw in front of him immediately confirmed Uranium's guess. I can actually swallow the heaven and earth spiritual energy of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. Isn't this exactly the same as me eating the radioactive soul beast? Then continue to go back. I just need to stay outside for a while to digest it. I will come out to digest it when I am full next time. In this way, the erosion of heaven and earth spiritual energy that I was worried about just now can be completely ignored. Uranium laughed, his expression was shocked, and he became energetic again. Not long after he came out, he immediately walked towards the direction of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. He would not go back tonight if he didn't figure out how to pick the fairy grass and how to store the fairy grass. Of course, his actions were also very careful, for fear of causing Douluo's reaction outside the mountain. After all, what he was doing now? But stealing the fairy grass. As for the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire, Zhu King alone probably couldn't pick and eat them right away. She had to go outside the valley. In other words, the time Zhu King had to absorb safely was only the time when Douluo went out of the mountain to drive Shrek away from the Shandao Royal Academy. In the morning, he drove away the Shrek, and at noon he should be with Yanzi, and the same in the afternoon. In the evening, the plot of catching Tang San unfolded. It must be said that under Uranium's thinking, there was a four-sided plot idea as a reference. There were detailed time divisions in many places, which made his time management have sufficient planning. Explore the energy fluctuations of the fairy grass and the rules of taking it, and start again. Uranium was not only satisfied with finding a fairy grass for Zhu King. The energy of the fairy grass was too great. Basically, one person could only eat one in a period of time. Even Tang San ate 2 fairy grasses and digested them in the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire for half a year before he started to eat the third one, Wang Chuan Kia Shulu. How should Zhu King digest the energy of a whole fairy grass? Forget it, there is not enough time. Zhu Xiuqing can only eat one immortal grass. With the energy fluctuation of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire, I only stayed there for less than a quarter of an hour and felt satisfied that my whole body was swollen. Not to mention these immortal grasses, they may have stayed there for hundreds or thousands of years. The energy contained in them cannot be digested in 1 or 2 years. It may take a lifetime. Uranium thought about it and came to the current conclusion. He dared to eat a few more plants because of the existence of the radiation field and the energy absorption halo. He could absorb the high concentration of heaven and earth spiritual energy contained in it to the maximum extent, and he was not afraid of being stuffed to death. At worst, he could turn on the energy absorption halo and absorb it for a few months, and then it should be almost digested. The question is, should I prepare Narcissus jade muscle bone for Zhu Xiuqing? I always feel that the quality of this fairy grass is not particularly high, and it has no special effects. It can neither strengthen the martial soul nor bring back the dead. It is too mediocre. Walking back to the yin-yang eye of ice and fire, Uranium raised his head and looked at the natural treasures and top-grade medicinal materials on the ground, and couldn't help but fall into confusion. But if it's something else, which ones should I look for? Although Narcissus jade muscle bone is a bit mediocre, it can provide Zhu Xiuqing with level 7 soul power and can strengthen her soul power training speed. No, that's not right. She doesn't need soul power very much. Increasing her soul power so much just proves that there is no extra energy to improve her martial soul. Recalling what happened in the original work, Uranium's original idea of changing his mind turned back again, and with a solemn look, he began to look around. He saw a very distinctive fairy grass. It was a white flower that looked ordinary. The flower was the size of a palm and shaped like a peony. It had no leaves. A large stone was connected to the root stem. The stone was completely black. The surrounding soil was sunken, which showed that it was extremely heavy. On the white flower, there were a few pieces of amazing red. The blood red color gave people a thrilling feeling. This is the heartbroken red of acacia. Looking at the flower in front of him, Uranium fell into silence for a long time. He liked Zhu Xiuqing, no doubt. And this grass was called the heartbroken red of acacia. It was a divine treasure among the immortal herbs. Only those who had a heart of love could spit out blood before they could pick it. Can you do it? Uranium looked at the heartbroken red of acacia and thought secretly in his heart at this moment. Forget it, this is Xiao Wu's, she can't make any mistakes. After looking at it for a few times, Uranium shook his head secretly and set his sights on other immortal herbs. 8-petal immortal orchid. Fragrance yellow immortal product. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Kilo tulip. Coxcomb phoenix sunflower. All the immortal herbs that the Shrek 7 devils had taken before were all in his sight, which opened his eyes. Of course, there were also the 8 aniseed mysterious ice grass and the fiery apricot, which were the 2 best immortal herbs that made Tang San perfect. But he didn't have any idea about these 2. It's not that he wanted to deliberately leave a cheat for Tang San, but because of a very simple reason. If he wanted to absorb these 2 immortal products, he must plunge into this yin-yang eye of ice and fire, and use the energy of these 2 to dissolve the medicinal power and achieve full absorption. But this is very time-consuming. It's not an exaggeration to say that it takes a day and a night. Then the question is, Tang San absorbed the 8 aniseed mysterious ice grass and the fiery apricot because he was sure that Douluo would not appear, so he dared to do so. And what about him? He is a thief of immortal herbs. He ate the immortal herbs right in front of the title Douluo and even took a bath in the hot spring. Moreover, he had no means of defense during the absorption process. As long as Douluo came to see his medicine garden in the morning, he would die. Even if his poison skills were restrained by the yin-yang eyes of ice and fire and could not be used, the other party's 9 spirit rings could easily kill him who could not resist. This is the real reason why he was too lazy to care about these 2 immortal herbs. Of course, if he could kill Douluo in advance, naturally, everything here would be his. 5 updates first, and there will be a few more in the evening. Chapter 200 Familiar Shadow. Uran stayed in the yin-yang eye of ice and fire for more than an hour. He found some interesting immortal herbs, among which there was a plant that could absorb moonlight, similar to an orchid, with extremely obvious energy fluctuations, not inferior to the Yaohong Cheyenne Ranger that Uran had just found. Uran named it this way, and its shape was very similar to the Cheyenne Renju that he had encountered in his previous life, except that the color had changed. In addition, he also found the Wangchuan Kiashulu, which was at the innermost edge, looking pitiful, as if being excluded, which made him laugh. This time, the pre-war preparations were perfect. Not only did he find the appropriate immortal herbs, but he also confirmed that he was very adaptable to this yin-yang eye of ice and fire. The first time he absorbed the energy of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire, he felt uncomfortable all over at most a quarter of an hour, and it seemed that his whole body was about to split. But as he absorbed more and more, he could stay longer and longer. From the first quarter of an hour to the next 2 quarters of an hour, then to 4 quarters of an hour, and finally, half an hour. Every time he was making progress, but Uranium could not feel any changes in his body after consuming so much energy, as if his body was a bottomless pit, or a glutton. Maybe not long after, with my resistance to the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, I can directly soak in the yin-yang eye of ice and fire and directly absorb the most essential energy. Uranium looked at the 2-color spring in the center of the valley and couldn't help but say secretly, "It's almost time, I should go and have a good rest." With that, Uranium climbed up the road he had come from before and prepared to retreat. His mission here has been completed, scouting the environment, scouting in advance, confirming his adaptability, determining the route of taking the fairy grass, and finally adapting the fairy grass. So there is no need to stay here, it's time to go, otherwise there is a risk of being discovered by Douluo. Fighting with the titled Douluo? He didn't have this idea. Now I just have to wait for Douluo to leave, so I can eat the immortal grass directly, without anyone noticing. As he thought, Uranium rose up, tapped the mountain wall with his toes, and kept jumping on the rock wall, circling and rising above the mountain pass like a big bird. As the distant figure continued to disappear, suddenly, this yin-yang eye of ice and fire began to change. Red and blue, 2 energy fluctuations that ordinary people could not see clearly, suddenly mixed with a touch of blood. An iron-gray flower with broad branches and leaves and clear veins kept swaying in the unclear shadows, as if it was fully absorbing the energy of the yin-yang eye of ice and fire. The dark red veins became clearer, like a beating heart, with a suffocating sense of oppression. As the moonlight continued to shine, this iron-gray flower gradually glowed red. Like blood red. Faintly, you can see that on the innermost side of this big flower, there is an ordinary bird soul beast lying quietly on the ground, with blood-red eyes and no pupils, as if it had lost all its intelligence and was at the mercy of others. As Uranium completely disappeared in the valley and left the yin-yang eye of ice and fire, the big flower began to light up with an extremely enchanting red light, even overwhelming the momentum of all the fairy grasses around it. At this moment, it was like the emperor of flowers that everyone admired. Whether it was the fragrant kilo fairy product, the strange chrysanthemum, or the divine product acacia heartbroken red, they all slightly drooped their branches, as if they were paying homage to the emperor and surrendering to him. The high-level soul beasts in the sunset forest were beginning to disappear at an unimaginable speed. There were no corpses, no debris, and no traces. Just like that, they disappeared. The basic color tone of the forest at night was even darker, there was no wind, and the active life exuded light red, orange, fluorescent green and other colors, which were more conspicuous than during the day. The campfire still exuded dark red residual heat. Uranium first patrolled around the camp for several times, accurately attacked and killed several low-level 1000-year soul beasts, temporarily clearing the threats near the camp. Then, he looked in a direction and went deep into the forest. Back to camp number 2. Urin tiptoed back to the camp, but found that there was only one tent around, and there was no other place to rest, which put Urin in a very embarrassing situation. Needless to say, the place where he was going to sleep must be next to Zuzuking. Forget it, I'll just find a tree to sleep under. Shaking his head, Urin gave up the idea of sleeping in the same room with Zuzuking. He was still a little reluctant. In short, he was too timid. The last time he slept in the tent with her, he was already very embarrassed. It seemed that the sound of breathing and talking was still vivid and unforgettable. And this time, there was no danger around, and it would be over if he slept outside. It was no big deal. Thinking of this, Urin stopped his steps to the tent, turned his head decisively, and scanned the surroundings with sharp eyes. Suddenly, a voice came from the tent. "Come in." It was Zuzuking's voice. She had heard the noise in the camp, and with a slight murmur, she naturally thought of Urin's return. Oh! The silver-haired young man stood there blankly under the pouring moonlight. The silver light set off the young man's slightly red face. The latest novels are first published on 69 Shuba. "Oh, here I come." When Zhu King said this, Uranium felt even more embarrassed. But he didn't stand there for a long time. Uranium responded to Zhu King in the tent softly, and then turned his head to look at the small tent. His face became even redder. For no reason, his breathing became a little faster. Color is emptiness, emptiness is color. Then, he went in. In an instant, a faint fragrance came to his face, and the fragrance was so fragrant that it was like being in a sea of flowers, which was fascinating. Inside the tent, Zhu King's cold face half appeared from the bed, her slender green jade fingers resting on the edge. She was young, but had a kind of beauty. She blinked her long eyelashes and lingered on Uranium's body for a moment, and suddenly she was a little absent-minded. "Uranium, are you okay?" The two looked at each other for a long time, and Zhu King suddenly got into the bed, and a low voice came from the bed. Seeing Zhu King like this, Uranium couldn't help scratching his head, a little confused. Since staying with her for a longer and longer time, Uranium felt that he was more and more like a complete person, not half a year ago, who didn't know how to smile, didn't know how to communicate, and his mind was full of family, rise, victory and domination. Sleep. As if she felt that Uranium was still staring at her, Zhu King's voice was more full of indescribable emotions, her pretty face was slightly red, she stretched out her palm and patted the bed beside her, and hurriedly urged, "Yes." With a faint reply, Uranium took off her outer clothes with a smile, leaving her shirt on, and went straight to the bed prepared by Zhu King. But Uranium did not sleep, but whispered to Zhu King. "Zhu Qing." The girl was lying on the quilt, and suddenly heard the voice of Uranium beside her, and she was stunned. "Zhu Qing?" Such an intimate name immediately made Zhu King a little dazed, her body trembled slightly, and her face was red all the way to her ears. She didn't know what to say. After a long time, Zhu King muttered, "Uranium." But there was no response from inside the tent. The surroundings were so quiet that it seemed that if a needle dropped, it could be heard clearly. The girl immediately jumped out of the quilt, and her eyes were on Uranium who was sleeping soundly beside her, and she couldn't help but be a little stunned. Looking at Uranium's sleeping face, and thinking about how she had been thinking about it for so long, Zhu King had to grit her teeth, turn over angrily, and turn her back to Uranium, and no longer pay attention to him. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.